Council meeting for Monday, June 28th, 2021. Clerk, could you please do the roll call?
Sure. Mayor Robinson?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Newenhouse?
Here.
Councilmember Barksdale?
Here.
Councilmember Lee?
Here.
Councilmember Robertson?
Good evening, I'm here.
Thank you. Councilmember Stokes?
Here.
And Councilmember Bowman?
Here.
Thank you.
Councilmember Lee, would you please lead us in the flag salute?
Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty
and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a proclamation tonight. Councilmember Zahn, could you please read the Parks and Recreation Month proclamation?
Yes, happy to, Mayor. Whereas parks and recreation programs are vitally important to establishing and maintaining the quality of life in our community, and whereas these programs partner with the community, providing places for people of all cultures to gather, celebrate, and volunteer their time and talents to make a difference. And whereas parks and recreation programs build healthy, active communities and aid in the prevention of chronic disease and improve the mental and emotional health of all residents. And whereas people with disabilities benefit from opportunities and choices for recreation, socialization, and learning to facilitate participation in the life of our community. And whereas parks and recreation programs also enhance a community's economic prosperity through increased property values and tourism, the attraction and retention of businesses, and crime reduction. And whereas our parks and natural areas ensure the ecological beauty of our community and provide a place for children and adults to connect with nature and recreate outdoors. And whereas Bellevue's parks, trails, and natural areas have seen a significant increase in use during the pandemic as residents have sought outdoor opportunities to stay active and healthy. And whereas as a city in a park, Bellevue's parks and natural recreation areas are fundamental not only to the beauty of our community, but also to its environmental well-being by improving air and water quality, protecting groundwater, preventing flooding, and providing vegetative buffers and habitat for wildlife. Now, therefore, I, on behalf of Lynn Robinson, Mayor of the City of Bellevue, Washington, and on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim the month of July 2021 as Parks and Recreation Month in Bellevue and urge everyone to enjoy and recognize the many benefits of our parks, natural areas, trails, and recreation facilities.
Thank you, Councilmember Zahn. So tonight we have a couple of modifications to our agenda. Our first is item 8F, resolution 9962 is going to be pulled from tonight's consent calendar and will be brought back to a future meeting. And in addition, the city manager would like to report back on a few items. So Deputy Mayor, do you have a motion?
I certainly do. I move to approve the agenda amended to remove item 8F, resolution 9962 from the consent agenda and add an update from the city manager on the city manager report to address the cooling centers, reopening of City Hall, and the eviction moratorium.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. All right, City Clerk, do we have anyone signed up for our oral communications tonight?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. There are 5 pre-registered speakers for oral communications. And with that, I will call our first speaker, who is Diana Thompson. And Ms. Thompson, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, we are popping up the timer now.
I don't understand you right now.
They're getting the timer ready for you.
I think we may have a delay. Can you hold, please, for 1 second? Okay, Ms. Thompson, you can start when you're ready.
Good evening. My name is Diana Thompson and my address is on record. I reside in a dead-end street area of 25 homes in Northtown, a subdivision of Northwest Bellevue. I have reviewed the proposed Northwest Bellevue neighborhood plan presented to the Planning Commission and believe changes are needed. First, the goals and policies of the plan are drafted so they can be applied to any sub-neighborhood in Northwest Bellevue. Clearly, the single-family areas of Northtown should have different goals and policies than the office complexes along 112th Northeast and the multifamily dwelling areas of Maidenbauer. One size does not fit all. Second, Northwest Bellevue should retain its single-family residence areas, which currently take up over half of our geographical area. In repeated elections, many candidates for city council have emphasized that they wanted to protect our neighborhoods. It was anticipated that the growth and height of the city would stay downtown and not move into single-family resident neighborhoods. We believe that the desires of homeowners, not builders, would impact our neighborhoods and that our zoning would remain the same. Unfortunately, proposed plan policies SNW 24 and SNW 25 encourage a mix of housing typologies within both lower and higher intensity districts. And they also recommend the city explore introducing detached accessory dwelling units. I oppose detached accessory dwelling units in single-family residence neighborhoods of Northtown. However, if the city chooses to allow these detached ADUs, the property owner should be required to live on the premises. In addition, because DADUs are now being considered for the single-family neighborhoods of Northwest Bellevue, it would accomplish better and fairer city planning if at this time such changes should also be considered for all Bellevue single-family neighborhoods, including Somerset, Wilburton, Lake Hills, Newport Hills, and others. Finally, I believe more persons in Northwest Bellevue oppose DADUs than favor them. I wanted to just mention a few points that are made in the Northwest comment summary. One said, don't subdivide residential properties or rezone residential areas. Another said, we need you to leave us alone. Another said, like the way it is. And finally, one said, note to backyard cottages. People would price them as high as they could, and they would not be more affordable. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. And the next speaker on our list is Mon Wig. And Mr. Wig, can you hear me? Mr. Wig, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Perfect.
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Your time begins now.
Thank you. This is Mon Wig, 4811 134th Place Southeast in Bellevue, Washington 98006. We first want to thank Brad Miyake and his staff for the tremendous amount of work and energy they have put into East Main to date. The sites across Transit Station will be a gateway to downtown Bellevue. We are seeking your help to assure that the original vision of this area, as recommended by CAC and fully supported by the comprehensive plan, is realized. We have been working for many years now to get this right, and we are very close. The Bellevue Club and WIC Properties have sent a joint letter to staff and the council outlining the remaining 7 items that we believe merit your consideration as the East Main LUCA is deliberated and finalized. The main goal of our requests is to ensure that we are able to, 1, create an iconic development that preserves sunlight and air circulation through a thoughtful site plan design. 2, ensure that taller buildings are located closer to I-405 and Main Street and away from the neighborhood, and shorter buildings are placed closer to 112th. 3, maximize density across the transit station. And 4, provide a mixed-use development that includes housing and is financially feasible. Please note that staff's table and our table, there are some differences. Staff's table doesn't capture everything that our table does. So if you can look at our table, we would appreciate that. As you give staff direction to proceed, we would appreciate your inclusion of our request from table 1 of our 625 letter in council's direction to staff. Again, thank you to council and staff in your efforts to drafting this amendment, and we look forward to working with you on the final iteration of the code in the next few months. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wig. The next speaker is Tran Larson. And Ms. Tran Larson, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Your time begins now.
Thank you so much. Good evening. My name is Tran Larson, and I'm the Community Engagement Manager at the Housing Justice Project. We provide free legal aid to low-income renters facing eviction in King County. I'm calling tonight to encourage this council to reconsider their delay of enacting a local moratorium or furthering tenant protections. I typically have something prepared, but tonight I don't because I was disappointed, but not necessarily surprised that this council removed this item from their agenda tonight after Governor Inslee announced the bridge moratorium. I think this was done in haste because we do not know the exact language around the proclamation. Inslee made it very clear that it is not an extension of the current moratorium and it will be far more restrictive, therefore offering much fewer protections to tenants as a whole. Being that we don't know what that is going to look like and the language is pretty vague and what it means for rental assistance programs to be operational before landlords are able to evict. I think this was a pretty poor decision on council's part to not even discuss this any further. And I would really like to remind folks that there is a reason that we have local governments who are responsible to their constituents and the issues that they face. Excusing yourself from passing further protections because state legislation provided some is a cop-out, frankly. Bellevue residents are evicted similar to Seattle residents, to Kenmore, Kirkland, and Bereans. And these cities all took it upon themselves to expend their local moratorium and enact stronger tenant protections. Renters shouldn't be at risk for homelessness when they would be protected if they lived in one of those 4 cities. I am asking this council to reconsider and talk about tenant protections and extending your local moratorium. And if it is duplicative, that's fine. It doesn't hurt. But if it's not, you are providing protections that your residents and constituents need that the moratorium likely does not cover. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tran Larson. The next speaker on our list tonight is Bill Thurston. And Mr. Thurston, can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. Your time begins now.
Thank you very much. I'm Bill Thurston. I represent the Bellevue Club here at 11200 Southeast 6th Street, Bellevue, Washington. To begin, first and foremost, I want to thank the council for their involvement. And I have been in this endeavor since the beginning of the CAC, and it's gone on extensively. And absent the council's involvement, we wouldn't be where we are today. And I would want to extend my acknowledgement to the council and hope they will continue to be involved through this process. We'd also like to thank the planning department that has been very responsive and worked diligently to make all of this successfully come to completion for our stakeholders. Most importantly, I want to thank Wig Properties for bringing forward a vision of the CAC that is consistent with the envelope that was envisioned for this area. And this is critical and the linchpin to the success of this district. And the members of the CAC fully supported this. Weak Properties is based upon a feasibility that is essential to development. It's built upon 15.5 acres, and it'll provide a landmark entry into Bellevue and sound transit. And we fully endorse their request that they made to the city council. We also sent a letter independent of that. Speaking on behalf of the Bellevue Club, we began 40 years ago to support the interest of families, businesses, and we are today a landmark athletic facility as well as a social and hospitality resource. Our site was selected to support these facilities in a structure today that is non-conforming. We're not a commercial area, but a destination community for those who wish to belong. Our mission is to support the future interest of these resources with potential development of the small remaining property. This costly undertaking must build upon the character and needs of this community. Because of the unique non-conforming nature of our existing facility, we ask that any code amendments not result in changes to our existing building. The expansion of the club should be exempt from code requirements that are inconsistent with our business and facilities. Feasibility must be supported by market-driven alternatives. Mandatory housing is inconsistent with our business and other needs of the community. We encourage the council to support the requests of the stakeholders, and feasibility to move this forward is critical, that we keep all of this in play so we can move forward effectively. I want to thank you and members of the Planning Commission or Planning Department once again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thurston. The final pre-registered speaker this evening is Matt Gleeson. And Mr. Gleeson, I believe this might be you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear me as well.
I can. There's a little bit of feedback there, but I can hear you. So your time begins now.
Okay. Hi, my name is Matt Gleeson. I'm an organizer with the Transit Writers Union, and I'm also a renter during the pandemic, a worker in Bellevue. I'm here today to talk about the dropping of the renter protections from today's meeting. I'm just very concerned about that. I think that the bridge that Inslee has proposed, though the details aren't out, it sounds like a lot of people could definitely fall through the cracks, specifically how it says that it just requires counties to have an operational rental assistance program, but it seems like it could very well expire once money starts going out and leave tons and tons of people vulnerable to eviction. It can also let them have their rents increased and have late fees. And so all that to me is really concerning. I don't really understand, I guess, how it seems to me like the consequences of not acting here are so great, and the cost of just considering this and passing an ordinance is so small. It's just very frustrating to me to see this get dropped. I think that, you know, if there's a couple months where we have a weaker moratorium, maybe that doesn't sound so significant from the level of the council, but it will mean that people lose their homes, and like my neighbors could end up on the street. It's just awful to consider, and I don't feel that the council has considered that with the necessary weight that they should. So I'm asking the council to reconsider taking up those renter protections and seriously discuss them. Thanks.
And thank you, Mr. Gleeson, Mr. Gleeson. And at this point, I would ask, that is the end of our pre-registered list. Is there anyone else connected to this call who would like to make communication to the council? If so, please use the raise hand function or *9 if you are connected with a phone. And I see 2 additional hands. First, I saw the Housing Development Consortium. Can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, if you could state your name, since I can't tell that, and then your time will begin.
Okay. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Robinson and council members. I am Patience Malava, Director of Government Relations and Policy at the Housing Development Consortium of Seattle-King County. I am excited to offer continued support for the consensus package of the Housing Roundtable that has shaped the MFTE program update that the city is working on. I also want to underscore that this collaborative approach that has led to the current solutions presented in the ordinance that is now the MFTE so far would not have come together without the strong encouragement of the mayor. So on behalf of our sector, thank you, Mayor and the council, for the work you've done so far on housing affordability and production. We are excited to also see the capping of affordable rents for returning MFTE tenants.
Ms. Malava?
Yes.
I am so sorry. I'm going to have to break in. It appears that your comments are related to the public hearing that we have on the agenda later this evening. Is that correct? Okay, that is a separate portion of our agenda. Right now, we're just at oral communication. So please hold your thoughts, and I have your name on my list for the MFTE public hearing.
Wonderful. Thank you. Sorry about that.
No, no problem. Thank you. I do see one additional hand for oral communication, and that is Liana Godinez. Ms. Godinez, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. And you have not signed up for a public hearing, correct?
No, I didn't make the deadline. I apologize.
Perfect. Thank you. So go ahead and your time begins now.
Okay, thank you so much for your time. So my name is Liana Godinez. I am the Homeless Services Coordinator for the Bellevue School District. I am speaking today in favor of a City of Bellevue rental moratorium. Since the start of the pandemic, I have assisted families who have lost their jobs and their housing through no fault of their own. I have assisted families who are owing large amounts of debt. We're talking monies in the thousands. This loss of housing has impacted some of our most fragile residents, such as women who are fleeing domestic violence, children, and people with disabilities. Some of these families were already living on the edge of, one crisis away from ending completely homeless and in the streets. I have also seen an increase in need for rental assistance, along with childcare and food services or resources. Finally, I have seen an increase in need for legal resources and mediation services to assist renters and landlords in coming up with repayment plans so that this debt that they have or amount that they owe doesn't remain on their records, which can impact their ability to rent in the future. I think there's three important keys to remember when discussing rental moratoriums, in particular those that are local to our community. One, I think it's important to have a strong rental moratorium that gives our government and local nonprofits, times, and families the opportunity to access emergency funds that are available for rental assistance. I think it's also important to have legal counsel in place for both renters and landlords alike to ensure that all matters of back due rent are resolved amicably. And also it is important that families and renters do not continue to be penalized with excessive fees as a result of missed payments or incomplete payments as a result of the pandemic, again, through no fault of their own. So I appreciate your time and thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Godinez. At this point, I would make one final call out for oral communication. If there is anyone connected to this call who would like to make oral comments, please use the raise hand function or *9 if connected with a phone. Okay, Mayor, that will be the end of oral communications. There are no further hands.
Okay, thank you very much. I just want to announce that Councilmember Barksdale lost his connection, probably due to some systems problems with the heat. And so he is trying to find a way to either call in or go to City Hall and use the connections there. So we hope to have him back with us momentarily. In the meantime, we're on to the report of our city manager, Mr. Miyake.
Good evening, Mayor and Mayor Robinson and council members. I have 3 items to report on under the city manager's report, as was alluded to by Deputy Mayor Newenhouse. The first item is to let the council know and alert the council of the opening up of City Hall. I wanted to alert the council and viewing public that we are planning to open City Hall on July 6th. Opening up City Hall will be a phased in over time to full in-person service and hours. Our plans will be finalized once we receive Governor Inslee's guidance as well as the guidance of the state public health, which is anticipated to come out this Wednesday. I'd like to thank all the staff who have worked tirelessly on site and in a virtual environment to provide exceptional public service to the public. The second item, very quickly, is a quick status report on the council's information requests as they relate to the city imposing a citywide residential eviction moratorium. Last week, I informed the council that staff would be back tonight responding to these requests. As a reminder, the eviction moratorium request was premised on the governor not extending the statewide moratorium. And since then, the governor has announced that he plans to extend the moratorium as of last week. So I wanted to both the council and viewing public to know and understand why there were no materials in your packet this evening. Lastly, I'd like to cover under the city manager's reports, the city's response to just this record-breaking temperatures we've been experiencing over the past few days. Joining us this evening is Fire Chief Jay Hagan to provide us with that update on the city's response. Chief?
Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Neuenhouse, and members of council. With your permission, I'd like to share my screen for a brief presentation.
Yes.
Thank you so much. You should see it coming up momentarily.
We can see it.
Okay, very good. Mayor Robinson, this presentation is informational only. No guidance or decision is required this evening. Here is a brief look at the subjects I'd like to cover in fairly quick order. And I don't have to tell you, it's been hot out there. We've had record temperatures Saturday, Sunday, and today. We did reach 100 degrees or greater on 3 consecutive days for the first time since we've been recording this sort of weather, going back to 1894. Sunday was actually the hottest day ever recorded in Seattle, and we surpassed that at 1:10 p.m. today. And if you notice on the chart, the blue color is our normal mid-70s temperatures, and the orange color is what we've actually been experiencing. And you'll notice a red flag below today. That's a red flag warning, which means the National Weather Service has let us know that we're at extreme risk for fire danger and fire spread. It does happen occasionally, but not usually in June. And we do have a burn ban in effect for today and all of tomorrow. Regarding our public messaging, we've continued to use all of our channels, including updates to the online release, alert emails and text to over 14,000 news and emergency subscribers, including posts on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Nextdoor. The Neighborhoods Department has been posting information about our cooling center capability on the A-frame boards and kiosks around the city. Regarding outreach, we coordinated with our shelters prior to the heat situation, and we provided water, Gatorade, washcloths, spray bottles, and wipeable sunscreen pads were provided to our shelters and distributed to our city crews to be able to pass out to community members that they encountered in their daily work. Our CARES program and CCAT pilot were able to contact 14 apartment complexes in advance that were housing seniors to sort of determine the need for welfare checks over the weekend. Those included 15 to 30 individual personal visits for people at their homes, apartments, and including individuals living in vehicles and those living outside. We were also able to make a number of telephone checks just to do a quick check on people. We had a really interesting situation at the Bradenwood Senior Apartments where that building is situated in a manner that the third floor residents were really having a tough time due to heat and Western exposure. And our CARES advocates were able to get out there and actually tinfoil the windows to reflect a little bit of the heat energy. So we were lucky to be able to help in that way. Regarding cooling spaces, Jesse Canedo from Economic Development was able to contact our large retailers and partner with Bellevue Square and Factoria Marketplace to welcome the public into those spaces as a way to get cool. And it was described to me that there were sort of holiday season levels of folks in those spaces, which I witnessed myself. That was nice to see. The Lake Hills Library was open as a cooling space on Saturday, and Director Shiosaki from Parks was able to mobilize his staff to open the Crossroads Community Center and the North Bellevue Community Center on the weekend days when it would not normally have been open. Saturday, the numbers were sparse. It really picked up on Sunday with 36 visitors. And of course, the centers are still open today, so we don't have the totals for today, but we've seen a steady increase in that usage. Regarding our beaches and parks, the beginning of our lifeguarding capability coincided with the beginning of the heat on Saturday. So Anatai, Newcastle, and Maidenbower Bay were all open with lifeguard capability on the 26th. And as of the 26th, guards will be stationed at the larger beaches and will remain through our normal swim season. The other smaller beaches were also open, however, not supervised by lifeguards. And the Downtown Park and Crossroads Park spray grounds were also open and seeing heavy usage. All the public-facing crews in the city have been equipped to monitor the situation they encounter. They've all been distributed cold water and Gatorade, able to hand out to people that they encounter. City leadership has had ongoing coordination meetings focused on public messaging, outreach efforts, extending our cooling center capability, really all aspects of heat preparation and response. Our CARES advocates, who are our Masters of Social Work students, actually came in on the weekend and did extra volunteer hours to conduct that outreach with seniors in apartments without air conditioning, handed out a lot of Gatorade and water. Really lucky to be able to do that, as also our CCAT pilot, which is our coordination with Bellevue Police. Those teams were also out there doing some advocacy. And our Crossroads Community Center staff and our Parks operations staff opened facilities over the weekend, facilities that would not have otherwise been open, and stand ready to continue that effort as needed. Thank you, Mayor Robinson, for the opportunity to brief you this evening.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you for the excellent work that you're all doing for the community. Really appreciate it. Mr. Miyake, did you have anything else?
No, Mayor, that concludes my report for this evening.
Okay, thank you. I've got a good news story here. Each year, the University of Washington recognizes 100 undergraduate and graduate students for their contributions and honors them as one of the Husky 100 students. They're nominated by their peers, faculty, staff, and mentors as someone who has shown true passion, leadership, and dedication as a Husky. I'm really proud to announce that Bellevue's Christopher Hayes has been named to the 2021 Husky 100. In the announcement, staff noted that Christopher has served the UW community by sharing his experiencing and developing methods to assist others in many facets. This remarkable young man is getting his Bachelor's of Arts in Law, Economics, and Public Policy and Human Rights. Congratulations, Christopher. We're very proud of you. Okay, next up, we have appointments to the Arts Commission and Parks and Community Services, starting with Councilmember Stokes. Would you like to make your nomination?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Very pleased to do this. We had 11 applicants this time, which is larger than we usually do. And we had 5 people that we decided to interview. And I'm very pleased to announce that we all chose one candidate, Bhavna Bhargava. She has a BA in Fine Arts, a master's in business, and is involved in banking and other related industries. Worked with the Bellevue School District, PTA, and founded an organization called UX Exchange Forum, working with kids on professional careers and things like that. And she's lived in 6 countries and worked in arts in each. So she's bringing a lot of experience to us. And very, very excited about Bellevue and families here, and been here for some time. And she has a strong passion for giving back to the community. And she's going to be a great asset to both the commission itself and to the city. And we were in strong agreement for this candidate, both the staff and the chair of the commission and myself. And so please do nominate her and ask for your affirmation.
Why don't you make a motion and we'll vote on her?
Okay, I move to appoint Bhavana Bargosa Bargava, I can't read my own handwriting, to the Arts Commission for a 4-year term.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any
Aye.
opposed? Excellent. Thank you, Councilmember Stokes. And then Councilmember Zahn, would you like to make your nomination?
Yes, I am nominating Cassidy Giampetro for the Parks and Community Services Board. She is just so excited to serve on the Parks Board. She lives in the Lake Hills neighborhood, which is an area that we have not had representation on the Parks Board. And I think she brings a lot of energy, and she currently works for HopeLink and has been really engaged in the community. Just very excited to serve on the board. And one of the questions that we added this year to our interview process was the fact that on the council, we had added as part of our vision, sustainability, innovation, and equity. So each of the candidates was asked that question. And I thought that in all 3 of those areas that she was very thoughtful in how she might bring those elements into our Parks Board, especially as we embark on our Parks and Open Space Planning coming up. And so it was a unanimous decision, and I'd like to make a motion that we appoint Cassidy Giampetro to the Parks and Community Services Board to serve a 4-year term expiring May 31, 2025. Is
there a second? Thank you. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Great. Good. Welcome to our 2 new board members. Okay, next up is the consent calendar. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I move to approve the consent calendar with item 8F removed.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Next we have a public hearing. Mr. Miyake.
Yes, good evening, Mayor Robinson and council members. In front of you is a public hearing on the multifamily housing property tax exemption, which is an ordinance amending chapter 4.5 to the Bellevue City Code. And just by way of background, the council launched an update to the city's existing multifamily tax exemption program in October of 2020. This program allows for a tax exemption for developers in exchange for providing affordable housing. Staff, as a part of the update process, have been working hard with partnerships with stakeholder community, as well as to develop a program that increases utilization and furthers city policy objectives. This topic was last in front of council on May 24th, where council provided direction to prepare for a public hearing on a package of updates to the MFT program. So joining us this evening is Emil King, Assistant Director, as well as Elizabeth Durrett, both from the Community Development Department. With that, I'll turn it over to Emil King as well as Elizabeth.
And I'm gonna say, I think we have Councilmember Barksdale back, so that's good. Go ahead.
Thank you for the introduction, City Manager Miyake, and good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Neuenhuis, and members of council. I'd like to offer up a few introductory comments in advance of the public hearing tonight. Tonight is a significant milestone in our ongoing work on affordable housing. The multifamily tax exemption program is a very important part of Bellevue's strategy to produce more affordable housing within the city. As the city manager mentioned, it does allow for a market-based approach to help meet our significant affordable housing needs. The existing MFTE program is being revised to first and foremost increase production of affordable housing while also furthering city policy objectives relating to affordable housing. Council has had thoughtful policy discussions at 3 study sessions to date on the numerous facets of the MFTE program. We've also had a very robust ongoing stakeholder engagement process that has helped get the code to this point. We're now ready to conduct a public hearing with the ultimate goal of adopting the revised program provisions. As with all our new code provisions, we will be monitoring the MFTE program moving forward and report back to council during our biannual update on affordable housing. I'd like to now hand things over to Elizabeth Durrett, the project manager, to run through a few introductory slides in advance of the hearing.
Thank you, Emil. As Emil said, we will have a very short presentation today. So good evening, everyone. I will walk through this and then we'll get on to the public hearing. So today we are looking for holding the public hearing, and then potentially we could adopt an ordinance which was drafted up, which would amend Chapter 452, which is the MFTE code. I'll just briefly be going through the overall schedule, a summary of the outreach we've done today, the update elements themselves, and then our plan for implementation once adopted, if adopted. So here's the schedule. This is very similar to what you've seen throughout the process. We launched back in October and did a lot of stakeholder outreach and work for the next few months. And then as Emil mentioned, we had 3 study sessions with council. We are now today ready for a public hearing, which is required by state law and local code as well, on the geographic expansion, but we have chosen to include the program as a whole so that we can get robust public engagement throughout the process. We have gained 1 written communications to date so far. We did post notice as required 2 weeks ago and 1 week ago as well for the public hearing tonight. And you can see on here that we have a public hearing shown today. We could adopt today, but we could also adopt in July if changes are proposed to the ordinance that was posted alongside the public hearing materials. So this is a slide you have all seen before, so I'm going to go through it really quickly. This is just a summary of the outreach we've done. We've talked with dozens of different developers who've worked on projects in Bellevue to understand how they use the MFTE program and what they would like to see. We've worked very closely with the Bellevue Chamber, meeting with them at least monthly, often more frequently. We've also worked with HDC and with the BDA as well. So a very varied group of stakeholders have been part of this process. Looking at the existing program we have today, you see on the right, the areas in gray are where the existing program can be used. A lot of parts of the program are not suggesting being changed, but those areas are. And so we'll go through kind of the existing program pieces that are not being proposed to change, and then we'll go through the proposed changes at a really high level. So the tax exemption is a 12-year tax exemption on the residential improvements of a project. And in exchange, there are 20% of the units are offered as affordable. Our current program does not change any of that. That's tied to state law as well. We also have a requirement that any affordable units that are under 300 square foot in size, really small units, are at very deep affordability at 45% AMI. And we also allow an overlap and layering with the land use code incentive today. So all those things are proposed to remain the same, but we are looking at changing the affordability levels that are the baseline, as well as the locations where that would be permitted. And we're also looking at minorly tweaking our requirement that all projects include at least 15% of the units at 2 bedrooms or larger. So we'll walk through those really quickly. You can see the map on the right you've seen before. This just shows today in pink and red where we currently have multifamily zoning and where we are proposing, therefore, broadening the locations where the MFTE program could be used. It's worth noting that this just shows the map today, but the way that the code is written up would allow this to change over time. So for instance, if the East Main code has different requirements for whatever reason, or any other upcoming areas, those would also kind of apply. And so it's not a map per se that is stagnant. It changes over time with the zoning changes that might apply throughout the city. The baseline would change to 80% AMI in the proposed ordinance, but for those units that overlap with the land use code incentives and are really double counted, those would be at 15% AMI deeper, which would be 65% AMI. We also, as I mentioned, have an existing requirement that 15% of the units be at 2 bedrooms or larger to allow for more family-sized units. We are amending that slightly in the proposed ordinance that would allow for alternatives for those projects that do not meet that requirement. They could choose to either offer more units at that same affordability level, so it would go up to 25% of the units instead of 20% of the units, or they could choose to offer deeper affordability, so they would remain the same number of units, but they would be 10% AMI lower at 70% AMI, and that would only apply to the studios and 1 bedrooms rather than the family-sized units that they are offering. We also are proposing an introduction of 2 new tenant benefits. The first would be a discount on parking stalls outside of downtown area. So in downtown, there would be no discount on parking in an area that has very great access to transit. But in all other areas of the city, there would be a requirement that the owner offer a 30% discount on the market rate price of parking to MFTE tenants. The other tenant benefit is rent stabilization, and this is a little bit complicated, but it's kind of like rent control in a sense for MFTE tenants, where you try to limit the unexpectedly large rent hikes that you sometimes see when the market is really great. And so in instances where the rents would otherwise be raising faster than 3% annually, this caps that for any MFTE tenants that are renewing their leases to only 3% annually. It does allow for a kind of a catch-up provision in those years where it's not growing as quickly, so that the owners can start catching up with the amount that they actually receive from affordable tenants, allowing them to increase those rents up to 3% until they catch up to the otherwise kind of standard affordable rents. So this last slide just goes over kind of some of our implementation plan. Once adopted, these changes would still need kind of other continued work and making sure that everything we've put into this update really benefits the city and really sees that increase in affordable housing that we are looking for. So we're going to make sure we update all of our kind of packet materials and website. All of those public facing documents will get updated. We will create additional material for understanding kind of all of our affordable housing incentives and how they overlap with one another, so that that's very clear. We're also going to become very proactive in reaching out to MFTE or potential MFTE projects, so that we make sure no project slips through the cracks. We'll also be monitoring and reporting back on all of these things to make sure that we are meeting what council intends. And so we will be reporting back twice a year at that affordable housing strategy update. We'll be able to track information like, how many MFTE units we're seeing, but also things like, how much parking is actually being utilized both in downtown and outside of downtown. Other details like that we'll also be tracking. We'll also be updating our contract and covenant, and kind of looking at some of the administrative costs of this increased use of affordable housing. So lots of work to be done, but it'll be great to get this on the table and really get the message out to developers that this is a great new option. So again, just a repeat of the direction here to hold a public hearing and potentially adopt the ordinance. So I'm gonna, with that, hand it back over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So we are going to hold the public hearing and listen for comments, and then we'll have our own council discussion and questions. So is there a motion to open the public hearing?
I move to open the public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Clerk, do we have anybody signed up for public comment?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This evening, there are 7 pre-registered speakers for this public hearing. And with that, I will call the first person, and that is Abigail Deweese. Ms. Deweese, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Your time begins now.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Abby Deweese, and I'm a land use attorney at Hillis Clark, but I'm here tonight on behalf of NABP, the Commercial Real Estate Development Association, who is the leading organization for developers, owners, and investors of office, industrial, retail, and mixed-use real estate. We have thousands of members in Washington and across the Puget Sound region. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. We strongly support the changes to the MFTE ordinance Council is considering tonight. The changes to the AMI thresholds, coupled with the rent stabilization measure and the parking discount, create a workable program for tenants and developers alike. With all of the jobs headed to Bellevue, the city will need additional workforce housing, so we applaud this step to help meet the future demand. We also support the minor clarifying amendments proposed by the Chamber. We ask the Council to adopt these amendments with the broader ordinance. Thank you to staff who worked closely with the stakeholder group of which we were a part in order to craft the ordinance and these suggested changes. Special thanks is definitely owed to Emil, Elizabeth, and Mac. It has been a great partnership that we hope to replicate and build upon in the future. Last, we wanted to emphasize that this is a great first step, but that additional work is needed with the East Main and Wilburton rezones and in the Bellred and downtown lookbacks to reduce code barriers and pave the way for additional housing production in Bellevue. We look forward to diving into those efforts. Thank you again for the important work you do on behalf of the citizens and businesses of Bellevue.
Thank you, Ms. Deweese. And the next speaker on the list is Jane Broom. And Ms. Broom, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes.
Great. Thank you. Your time begins now.
Great. Thank you. Good evening, council members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm Jane Broom, Senior Director of Philanthropies at Microsoft, and it's great to see you all nice and cool tonight. 2.5 years ago, Microsoft announced our commitment to help advance affordable housing solutions across the East Side and cities just like Bellevue. The Affordable Housing Initiative consists of a $750 million investment, but perhaps more importantly, a commitment to work with local governments, communities, nonprofits, and businesses to adopt practical, inclusive, and responsible policies that will result in more housing options for people across income levels. As jobs grow across the East Side, we need to ensure the people who work here can live here too. Since then, we've spent hundreds of hours in conversation with the Bellevue City leadership around implementation of its 2017 Affordable Housing Strategy and ways the city can go further. Most recent data from our continued collaboration with Zillow shows that Bellevue still has a gap of approximately 34,000 middle and low income affordable housing units. It requires all of us to work together with focus and urgency. Along with strong leadership from the Bellevue Chamber, we are proud to be part of a growing coalition called the Eastside Housing Roundtable, a group of private sector and nonprofit organizations focused on increasing affordable housing in Bellevue. The expansion of Bellevue's MFTE program is a critical step in the right direction. Tonight, I want to thank the mayor, council members, and the staff, Brad, Kate, Mac, Mike, Emil, Elizabeth, and the rest of the staff for your tireless work on this new program. Our hope is that as Bellevue prepares for several years of unprecedented growth, utilization of this program will result in hundreds of new below market affordable homes. The nurses, daycare workers, restaurant managers, teachers, firefighters, and police officers who will live in these homes are the backbone of what make our communities great. We also support the friendly amendments brought forward by the Chamber. These small changes clarify a few minor elements of the legislation, including language that ensures the program can be utilized as soon as possible by projects already under construction. We know this legislation is only the beginning, and as Bellevue so well articulated in its affordable housing plan, we have so much more work ahead of us. Your partnership addressing this housing and affordability crisis head on is commendable, and we're so proud to be part of this great city. Thank you all for what you have done and will continue to do to help keep Bellevue affordable. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Brown. And now we are to Patience Malava. Ms. Malava, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you so much. Your time begins now.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Robinson and council members. I am Patience Malava, Director of Government Relations and Policy at the Housing Development Consortium of Seattle-King County. We are a membership association of more than 190 affordable housing providers working across the region to ensure that all people live with dignity in safe, healthy, and affordable homes. I am excited to offer continued support for the consensus package of the East Side Housing Roundtable that has shaped the MFTE program that is before you today. I also want to underscore that our collaborative approach that has gotten us to this point would not have come together without the strong encouragement of the mayor. So on behalf of our sector, I want to thank you, Mayor, Council, and staff for the work you've done on housing affordability and production so far. We are really excited to see the rent stabilization for returning MFTE tenants at a 3% annual increase. This, alongside the other provisions that are included in the MFTE ordinance, will promote greater affordability for renters, as it will ensure that the rent can never exceed the AMI threshold at a time. It can only be lower. We, of course, know that we have so much more work to do to address the housing crisis in Bellevue, and we are excited to partner with you and our partners at the Housing Roundtable to create affordable housing opportunities near jobs and transportation, and to ensure that every person in Bellevue has safe, healthy, and affordable housing. Once again, I want to close by thanking you for the diligent work towards addressing the affordable housing need in the city of Bellevue.
Thank you, Ms. Malava. The next speaker on the list is Jared Axelrod. Mr. Axelrod, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Great, your time.
Great, thank you. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Newenhouse, and members of the council. My name is Jared Axelrod, and I lead local public policy and external affairs for Amazon. Wanted to speak in support of Ordinance 6582, which would update the city's multifamily tax exemption program. Amazon is pleased to again comment in support of these updates to the MFTE program as a critical and necessary step to spur more affordable housing production in Bellevue. As we announced in January, alongside our launch of our $2 billion housing equity fund, Amazon strongly believes in the importance and power of public-private partnerships to address the challenge of affordable housing. And where we can, we will do our part. We are excited to announce our first financial commitment from our Housing Equity Fund to preserve 1,000 units in the area in partnership with the King County Housing Authority, including 470 here in Bellevue. And most recently, we announced a $100 million partnership with Sound Transit to develop transit-oriented affordable housing development in our region. But we also firmly believe that government must do its part to drive affordable housing strategies, which is why we are pleased and appreciative to see the council considering these updates to the MFTE program this evening. We support the revised MFTE ordinance in front of you this evening and believe that the compromises that have been made within it will allow us to make larger strides to meet Bellevue's housing demand. I'd like to thank the council, all of you, for your focus on this important subject and for shaping a policy that will produce more affordable housing development. I'd also like to thank the staff in the city manager's office and the community development department for their efforts and for working with private and public partners to create good policy that will meaningfully address affordable housing in Bellevue. I also want to acknowledge and thank the many other partners who were involved in this very collaborative approach, which will yield practical solutions captured in this ordinance. We know that we have much more work to do to address housing challenges in Bellevue and across the region, and we are excited to partner with you to create more affordable workforce housing near jobs and transportation to ensure that every person has safe, dignified, and affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Axelrod. The next speaker on the list is Joe Fain. And Mr. Fain, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. Your time begins now.
Thank you. For the record, this is Joe Fain. I'm proud to serve as the president and CEO of the Bellevue Chamber. The Bellevue Chamber strongly supports this proposal bringing forward before you tonight and are very excited about the next phase of work to help promote the use of this new MFTE program if adopted. We know that the housing stock has a lot of work to do to catch up with the projected growth in commercial growth that we've seen in recent months and years, but we also know that this council and this city has taken this mission very seriously. I would be remiss if I did not profusely thank staff, in particular Elizabeth, Emile, and Mac. Elizabeth remarked earlier about the frequency of meetings that she had with the chamber and our team. That is certainly no understatement. They have absolutely done an extraordinary job of outreach and of working in the minute details to craft a compromise that can be really beneficial for all parties. We're excited what this partnership represents. Bringing together the chamber, developers, the housing roundtable, city staff, and of course, each of you, the members of the Bellevue City Council, and the vision you have for growing affordable housing in Bellevue. As has been referenced by previous speakers, this morning I submitted a small package of 6 amendments to provide some minor clarifications that should help with the implementation process. And I again want to thank staff for their help in reviewing and perfecting those suggestions. Finally, I want to thank the leadership of Mayor Robinson on this matter. It is very clear for all of us that without her and the council's push in these matters, we may not be where we are at this great place today. I look forward to working with each of you on these issues in the future, and am very pleased to support this package today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fain. The next speaker is Matt Jack. And Mr. Jack, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Your time begins now.
Perfect. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, council members. I'm commenting on behalf of the Bellevue Downtown Association to advocate for council adoption of the latest version of the proposed multifamily tax exemption update. Our position to support this version of the MFTE update was recommended by our Housing Task Force, a group that has closely examined all of the MFTE components throughout the process, including the April 19th changes that were informed by the Chamber and HDC coalition letter. That task force recommendation was vetted by our Land Use and Livability Committee for 2 months, specifically focused on this new component of rent stabilization. 2 thumbs up. And finally, our board of directors reviewed and approved this work earlier this month. I share this work with you to let you know that our support is well informed and shares your confidence and excitement that this MFTE update is heading in the right direction. Well done, and kudos to staff. Well done to all the external partners from the private sector to the nonprofit housing providers to put this all together. We reviewed it all and we think you did a terrific job. A few other things that we'd like to include, just a couple notes, is that outside of this work, doesn't have to be added to it, but we'd love for a goal, some sort of measurable goal to be added afterwards to help us track success, so that if and when the time arises when we have a third update of the MFTE, we know where we're sitting. And then another note that this is really important right now to create a 12-year stock of workforce housing through the MFTE to make sure that we continue to build housing now and for years to come. Lastly, I just want to say again, thank you to everyone who participated in this process, and thank you to the City Council who triggered the MFTE update last fall. It started with you and it's going to end with you. So thank you so much for your leadership.
Thank you, Mr. Jack. The final pre-registered speaker on the list is Megan Altamore. Ms. Altamore, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Your time begins.
Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Nieuwenhuis, council members and staff. My name is Megan Altamore, and I am the Director of Community Services and Operational Excellence at HopeLink, as well as HopeLink's representative with the Eastside Housing Roundtable. I'm testifying tonight in support of the revised MFTE ordinance. First and foremost, like the other speakers tonight, I would really like to thank you and the city staff for the collaborative approach you've taken in getting to this ordinance revision. It will take all of us working together to solve the housing crises that we face. So I'm grateful for the collaborative approach and the progress that was made together. As many of you may know, HopeLink is a nonprofit serving King and Snohomish counties that employs 350 staff members, utilizes nearly 4,000 volunteers in a typical year, and helps nearly 65,000 people annually, including more than 6,000 Bellevue residents. Housing affordability at all levels is a top priority for HopeLink's board and leadership to support the residents that we serve, as well as our workforce, both paid and volunteer. We're excited to continue to partner with the City of Bellevue to identify new solutions to this crisis, and we see this revision as a very positive step forward. The revised ordinance is a powerful step in increasing the production of affordable units for all middle-income households in Bellevue, and we're particularly happy about the provision that caps rent increases annually for returning MFTE tenants. This allows continuity, planning, and security for households that are on tight budgets in this competitive housing market. Thank you again to the mayor, council, and staff for your dedication to this topic and for seeking solutions for all residents at all affordability levels. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Altamore. At this point, I would like to mention for the record that the council did receive 2 emails that were part of your desk packet related to this public hearing. And also at this point, I'd like to ask if there is anyone else connected to this call who would like to make comment during this public hearing. Please use the raise hand function or *9 if you are connected with a phone. Mayor, I do not see any additional hands.
Okay, well, we really appreciate the public comment tonight. Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
I move to close the public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so I'd like to open this up for council discussion. I'm going to go in order of Councilmember Stokes, Deputy Mayor, Councilmember Zahn, Robertson, Barksdale, Lee, and then myself. And so Councilmember Stokes, would you like to start us off?
Yes, I am very, very excited about the ordinance that and the changes made to the MFTE by staff and by the council as presented, ordinance 6582. I also think and appreciate the additions that the Bellevue Chamber and others and the Eastside group have put together, the amendments to that. I think it, you know, we've come a long ways in a short time period, actually, when you look at this, and this is, we've talked about MTFT for some time and putting it in place, and we made some little starts. And one of the key things in looking at the affordable housing strategy that we adopted in 2017 was finding ways to actually incentivize the community, builders, financiers, ordinary people, to move things forward. And we put it in place, and fortunately, because the changes since 2017 have been so dramatic that they're really putting a lot of pressure on us, and the community, and the business community, the community as a whole has come together and said, as Jane Broom said, this is something we have to do. We have a huge task ahead of us. So I'm very excited to have these new, you know, reworking the property tax exemption, the aspects to it, the way it's been thoughtfully designed, and again with the, and I would include the additions that asked for by the Bellevue Chamber. So I don't have any questions about it. I think it's laid out very well. Staff's done a good job, and I'm ready to move forward on it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, great kudos all around, and I want to start with staff, and I'm glad and thankful that so many of our speakers during the public hearing process called out our staff of Matt, Camille, and Liz, and many others that were integral in this. So thank you for those kind comments. I just also want to say kudos to my colleagues for moving this forward so quickly. And for all understanding that the critical role that affordable housing, workforce housing plays in Bellevue. And I know we all understand that, but actually getting things done and getting significant legislation done like this update is significant. Our job is not done. We still have more to do, but this is a big piece of it. And it was a big piece, as Councilmember Stokes mentioned, with our affordable housing strategy. So I am just so proud to be here today that we're able to move this forward. We were able to make a dent in the affordable housing. Yeah, so proud to be a part of this and move this forward today. I am in favor of adding the chamber's amendments. I do think they're thoughtful and will help with the implementation with this. I do have 2 quick questions that I think I know the answers to already, but I just want to verify before we move this forward. So one of the questions from the speakers was Matt Jack mentioned the tracking. I think we already have that in place, Emil, in terms of tracking the success as we usually do with a lot of different programs. But if you could speak to that just quickly. And then also a question that I just thought of in terms of how we're going to promote this MFTE. This program is so great. On the other hand, it's only going to be as great as people know about it. So how do we make sure that we be sure to notify all developers that this program has been revamped, the incentive is much stronger, and encourage them to take advantage of it?
Thank you. I'll go ahead and answer the first question and then hand it over to Elizabeth for the second. So monitoring of this program, as well as other new code and policies, is very important to the city, and staff do take it seriously to monitor things like this. Some of the items that we will be monitoring moving forward will be obviously the number of affordable units. We're also going to look at how the expansion of the geographic area is playing out. So we'll look at units overall in the city based on their geography, and all of the other elements that Elizabeth illuminated on the changes. We'll actually be monitoring those, from the parking to the AMI levels to amount overlapping. One important one is going to be if there were any developer who decided not to use it, the reasons why they chose not to use it moving forward. So that's a pretty essential one that we want to monitor as well.
Agreed.
So our thought is we would report back to council as part of our biannual update that we already have on the calendar. And it has come up if we needed to have something in the code to actually have us do the monitoring. And our thought as staff is we don't need something in the code that says go monitor. I think we would be doing that anyway.
Right. Exactly.
There is a state requirement that we monitor MFDE programs anyway. So with that, I'll hand it over to Elizabeth just to give some very brief thoughts on how we're going to be marketing this effort.
Yeah, thank you, Emil. I think, Emil touched on this a little bit in saying that one of the things we want to start tracking is the people who are not using MFTE. And that kind of gets at, in order to do that, we really do need to be marketing this, having those conversations early, making sure that we understand, the pros and cons to developers of the new program and kind of what their thought process is. And so in order to do that, we've been developing kind of a new process of just how we interact with developers and how early we can kind of talk to them about MFTE, as well as just kind of all of our actual outreach materials. So we're definitely developing a new process where we'll be proactively reaching out to developers rather than just handing them kind of a one-pager and saying, if you want to do this, talk to us. It'll really be much more proactive than that.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for that. So again, yeah, happy to move this forward and in favor of adding the chamber's amendments. And again, I just wanted to give a shout out just to the collaborative nature of this in terms of the affordable housing advocates, the organizations involved, such as the chamber, BDA, such as the different companies involved with that we heard today, and the developers, et cetera. Such a great collaborative effort. And again, happy to move this forward. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Council members on.
Yeah, so I'm gonna pile on here from my other 2 council members. Thank you so much, Mac, Emil, Elizabeth, and all of the collaboration and partnership. A couple of the statements made earlier about that we are in a housing crisis and we need to find ways to keep housing affordable, and we need to move with more urgency. So I am happy to support this, because to me, having an MFTE program, but it not being used, doesn't actually build housing. So I think that we have set the right balance for the MFTE so that housing will be built. And I appreciate the fact that you've thought about how we make sure that for those developers that are choosing not to use the MFTE, understanding why, so that we can look at whether this is working. You know, we've had MFTE for a couple of years, and this is a tweak because we recognize that it wasn't really working as well before. And I would think that some of the partners we have with HDC, NABP, Chamber, and BDA would also be happy to continue to partner with us to spread the word about what we're doing with MFTE so that more developers are aware of it. In terms of the amendment proposed by the Chamber, I do have a couple of clarifying questions. One is the amendment number 1, where it talks about if HUD no longer publishes the median family income figures. Is this something we would normally do, that if we're going to change rules, that we would have a public comment opportunity? I'm just trying to understand whether the proposal is something we wouldn't normally do, and that's why we want to add this to code, or if when we do something like that, we would always have a public comment opportunity. So that's one question, and maybe I could ask my couple. And then the second one on Amendment 2, it says no later than, and then 60 calendar days after. Was there, is 60 days magical versus something longer? The way I read this would be that this would give opportunities for those that have already submitted a building permit to have a little bit of time to say, oh, if now that I understand what this is, I might want to take advantage of it as well. So was there a reason why we picked 60 days? And so those were my 2 questions. Thanks.
Thank you for those questions, Councilmember Zahn. I'll go ahead and take the first one and then hand it over to Elizabeth for the second one. So on the amendment number 1 that talks about a scenario where Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, was no longer providing the AMI levels, it's not likely that that's going to happen. So it is a small percentage chance, but we think if it did happen and we did need to come up with a kind of our own AMI level, it is important enough that it would probably warrant a public comment period. So it's a probably low percentage chance it's going to happen, but what the AMI levels are and the rents are a pretty significant thing, just kind of looking back at all the math that goes into it. So staff does not feel it's an issue having the comment period for something like this, provided it is a bit of an anomaly. And I'd like to hand it over to Elizabeth to answer your second question, please.
Yeah, so I think you were asking about the 60-day calendar days as just kind of an amendment. So that's really based on just giving a little bit more time for the baseline deadline. You know, I think that it's worth pointing out that our code already allows flexibility in that deadline. So we do allow, with the submission of a letter to the director, that, you know, an extension to that initial deadline could be provided, and that has occurred in the past. And so there's already quite a bit of flexibility there, but we did want to kind of just add a little bit more time after the permit issuance to allow for you know, people to not get scared away by thinking that they missed the deadline or something like that. The 60-day number is not a magical number in and of itself. It's really just kind of enough to give that time, while also allowing enough time between, you know, those 60 days passing and when the building is basically complete and kind of leases are being, you know, written up, and this kind of needs to be finalized to get all of the information across, you know, make sure the contract and covenant gets covered, all of those details. So it's really just finding a balance between all those different timeline elements.
Okay, so I guess my question was, is 60 days sufficient then for all the things you're talking about, since this is somewhat of an arbitrary number of days? Or are we saying that that the proposal by the chamber means that they've already collaborated and the 60 days is sufficient? So I wasn't talking about getting rid of the days. I was actually trying to understand whether that's a right sizing of the number of days.
Yeah, a lot of the things I was mentioning would happen after those 60 days, but before the building is complete. And so 60 days is certainly enough kind of to, you know, but by the time the permit is issued, most, you know, owners will know whether they want to use MFT or not. But in some instances, having a little bit of extra time will just help. And so 60 days is really intended to help in those instances.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarification.
Of course.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Robertson.
Thanks. Well, I wholeheartedly agree with the cheering and celebrating of staff and partnership. When we work together, we can do amazing things. So really pleased that the community came together with the staff and the council to come up with the just right proposal. So wait, before I begin, let me just share with the council something that's really relevant, and it's going to be relevant to this topic and many other topics when it comes to growth in Bellevue. And that is, last week, the Growth Management Planning Council, as supported by and advocated for Bellevue, passed the new countywide planning policies and growth targets, which included growth targets for Bellevue of 35,000 new housing units and 70,000 new jobs by 2044. So this is a really important step in helping us realize some of those housing units, particularly with regard to affordable units. So that's one more reason why I'm so happy with this ordinance. I absolutely support the revisions and refinements, if you will, that the chamber put together. I did have one more slight revision that was really more of a clarification to their amendment number 5. It talks about the rent increases for existing tenants are not, they can't reset it, it's subject to the 3%. And if they're in a similar size type of unit, it doesn't say similar size type of affordable unit. So if this is read by someone who doesn't know the expectations, they might think that we are locking down rent for the market rate units as well. So I would support the chamber's proposed changes with the addition of affordable between type of and unit in their tracked change version. My question for staff is whether we can adopt this tonight. I know it can come back, but since we have the written revisions in front of us, if we wanted to make a motion to adopt the ordinance with the revisions in the chamber plus my little tiny tweak, could we then get this put to bed tonight?
I can go ahead and start that answer, and then I would like some potential follow-up from the city clerk. So we did write the agenda memo with a few different options, and option 2 would be the option that I think you're asking about, Councilmember Robertson, which would be hold the public hearing and then move to amend the ordinance to reflect minor changes within the scope of this effort and adopt the ordinance as amended tonight. So we wrote up this memo clearly before we got the chamber's correspondence. Staff is fully in support of the chamber's suggestions, and we don't see any issue with your suggested amendment. So I think it does. I'd like some clarification from the city clerk if these would be viewed as so-called minor amendments. They are clear in nature and they do have staff support. So I can leave it at that.
Maybe we can get the clerk to weigh in at the end of our conversation in case there are more changes.
Okay. I was waiting for her. So yeah, when everyone's had a chance to talk, I definitely would support taking action tonight.
Thank you. Councilmember Barksdale.
All right, thank you, Mayor. So echo the sentiments around the collaboration and appreciate everybody working together. And also that, given that the previous program wasn't working, the need to revisit to get more affordable units built. Building on Matt Jack's question around having a goal, I know we're measuring the items you mentioned, do we have targets? Because I think if I've heard his question and align with what I was thinking, we have an expectation, I think, of how many affordable units we would expect to see built with this MFT program now. So we'd love to see a target based on permitted projects throughout the areas where MFTE applies. And then the second question, I brought this up the last time. This is about developers, but it's also about tenants. And what are we doing to get feedback from tenants about their experience in the affordable units? What are our plans for that? Thank you.
Sure. So the Councilmember Barksdale, we did have a, I'm going to call it a rough estimate / target of 110 to 160 units expected with the update, and that would including overlapping units. So I think as we kind of flesh out our monitoring and metrics, we can easily put some targets in there as well, consistent with your comments and Mr. Jack's comments.
Feedback from tenants on how the program is working for them and getting materials to them.
Yeah, so the as part of the new provisions that relate directly to tenants, so something like the parking provisions, we'll be working with Arch on how to get the word out on those provisions so that they're knowledgeable along with the building managers so that we can have full compliance of those new provisions. I know you've also been interested in staff thinking about qualitative feedback loops with affordable housing tenants. So staff is thinking about that in MFTE and other affordable projects. It can be a bit more time consuming to do the qualitative analysis, as you know. So we're trying to do some smart metrics that would cover both land use incentive units as well as MFTE units. So we would have more to report on that in the coming months. Okay. And then Mayor, I just wanted to note when Charmaine gives her feedback, we do have Kathy Gerla on the phone. Would be good to check into on kind of the definition of minor changes as well. So I'll turn it back over to you, Mayor.
Yeah, very good. Okay, Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, this is a good story. Bellevue is a very desirable place to live. 54 years ago, I wanted to come to Bellevue to live. And when people want to live here, it's a supply and demand, right? There's not enough housing for people who want to be living here. And my wife and I, we have to work with professionals, but raise a family. I mean, we made it, luckily. We work hard and make a lot of sacrifices. And this has continued. And it's a wonderful thing because of all the things that, we all know. I don't need to go over. But first of all, before I go into a little bit more, I want to say kudos to the staff as all the council members made. And but I don't want to say too much. I don't want to spoil them. I've been here long enough. They know how I feel about them. So kudos, good job. So this has continued, and we have become a bedroom community 50 some years ago, and now we are actually a urban center. People are working here, so we got a lot more people coming, living here, and we're very fortunate. People continue to do so because we've been able to maintain the quality of life, and Amazon's coming. 25,000 more, and other folks are coming. So it's really becoming a crisis. And so affordable housing has always been a problem because of supply and demand. So, but now it's a crisis. I'm really happy that the City Council is now addressing this issue, we're looking at it, even though we know it's been happening. So I'm happy, I'm really glad that we are coming with a solution because we have wonderful private-public partners. We work with users as well. We have people who understand how to create housing. We can talk our face blue, but if there's no housing built, nothing much we can do. And I think the city has done a great job at keeping the cost low, cutting regulations if possible, being efficient and effective. I think we did all, but it's not enough. So what we witnessed before with Chamber, with 3DA, with developers, with business coming to us, and they realize there's a problem, a situation we need to work on. So they have helped, they've really been stepping up, and it's really great. We're blessed. And, this is a wonderful project, the MultiFamily Tax Exemption program, because it encourages a market solution, encourages people who can build, the developers that want to build. It makes sense for them to be physically sustainable. And I think this is great. And they are able to talk, to all the partners, the people who need the service, and it makes sense. And so it's going to work out, it's going to continue. And I think the one factor that we have taken for granted. It's not stepping up and talk, but I believe that we represent them. As city council members, we represent the public. The community realizes also this is a desirable place. It's more expensive than we want it to be. The supply is going to be not keeping up with the demand. And people who are like myself live here for 50 years. Eventually, it's going to be, live on the flex income. We need to figure out how to continue to be able to still enjoy the quality of life. And I'm used to here all my life. And so there's a merits of housing, that requirement that we need to provide to keep us the way it is and consistent with the Bellevue's value of quality of life, what we value to be for our families, for the future generations, for our kids that have been raised there, now they are somewhere else, now they're coming back as high-tech employees. So this is just a merits of things, and people who work in our city, because people who don't get to live here, they create a lot of other environmental problems, traffic, congestion, all that stuff. So I think by addressing this very essential question of providing adequate housing, it's a major, major, major challenge. But we're taking a real great step by solving it because of the partnerships involved. And I think this is really consistent with Bellevue's value, because it's for us, it's to solve our dilemma, our problems. So I think hopefully, we, the public, they are not here, they are not talking against it. That's wonderful. All we're hearing is, hey, this is a great program. We're working hard. Kudos to everybody. So I'm really happy to be able to represent the public. I think all the council members do. And we're having great partners. We're working together. We come up with solutions. That's good for everyone. And fiscally, it's going to work and sustainable. So I agree to it. I support it. And the amendment that's providing, we'll look at it, think about it a little bit more, but sounded like, the city staff agrees with it. And unless we find some fatal flaws, I will support it as well. Thank you.
Thank you. So yeah, I'm very, very pleased with the work that's being presented to us tonight. This is a collaborative effort. It's tailor-made for Bellevue, and it's innovative. And I'm excited to implement it and really hope that we see the results. We can't waste any time. We need to get that affordable housing going. So I'm confident that this is a good effort from our council and from our staff and from our community partners. And so I'm very supportive of it. I did want to make a few tweaks to the clarifying amendments that were offered on number 4, 5, and 6. It says number 4 provides greater clarity around the definition of unit sizes. And I'd like to say greater clarity and consistency with the city's definition of unit sizes, so that we're actually basing this on the city's definition. And that would go with number 5 as well, provides greater clarity and consistency with cities. Consistency with the city around the definition of comparable, and then Councilmember Robertson's affordable unit. And then number 6 would be clarifies the definition of market rate parking for the purposes of calculating the MFTE parking discount consistent with the City of Bellevue's definition. So I don't know if I've just made this too complicated to pass tonight. And but I think that before we go into that, we should get an idea if there's support for the changes that I'm offering here, and Councilmember Robertson's adding affordable to the unit on number 5 as well. So can I get some head nods or shakes if you're okay with, okay, Councilmember Robertson?
Can you go through those again? I was trying to pull up the proposed amendments. Mm-hmm. I'm having a hard time following you.
So on amendment number 4.
Okay.
This applies to 4, 5, and 6. So amendment number 4 says provide greater clarity, and then I would add and consistency with the city's definition of unit sizes as it relates to proportional unit mix.
Are you looking at the actual strike draft of the amendments, or are you looking at
No, I'm looking at an email I got, so it's a little bit of a different version of what you're looking at.
Okay, because I'm looking at Amendment 4, which is 452-094B, and it starts with the mix of unit types.
I'm looking at a summary of it.
Okay, so you're wanting to amend the summary, or you're wanting to amend the code?
The actual code to include I'm trying to relate it to the city's definition and not just
I'm
be
gonna
an
agree
open.
with you. I just need to understand it.
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay. So where do you want to add where?
So just hold on. There it is. Okay. Okay. Oh, great. Now it's so small, I can't see it. Okay.
Mayor, this is the clerk, would it be helpful if I, excuse me, popped up the draft letter from the chamber?
You can do that, but it sounds like Councilmember Robertson would rather go off the strike draft.
What I'm looking at is the strike draft attachment to the email from the chambers.
Yeah, I can share that screen if you would like.
Okay, why don't you do that? And I'm going to grab my glasses just a sec.
Councilmember Robertson, is this what you were looking at?
That's what I was looking at, because these are the actual amendments. Can you make those bigger, please?
Sure.
Could we have a conversation?
Mayor Robinson.
Go ahead, Neil.
Yeah, Mayor Robinson, I wanted to provide just one point of clarification following up on Councilmember Robertson's feedback. We have the strike draft that is up on the screen, and those are sections of the actual MFTE code that show the chamber's suggested edits. So we do need to make sure that there's full understanding and agreement on anything that's in this document and adopted. So if you're going to make any changes to the document that Charmaine has up on the screen, we need to be crystal clear if we're going to do anything tonight.
Well, let me ask you something. I'm trying to make these new definitions consistent with the cities. And so if you're comfortable that it is consistent with the city's already definitions, I don't want to have affordable unit size redefined.
Yeah, we have looked over this language, and staff are comfortable with the language as written. If there were edits that you were desiring based on the summaries that the chamber sent over, which was the email that kind of, I'm going to say, described this attachment, then that would require more work that probably would be better suited not happening kind of on the fly just prior to adoption. So that would be my one recommendation. Staff has examined this, and we are comfortable with the proposed language and don't think it takes us off kilter of other ways that we describe housing units.
Okay, well, I'm comfortable with that. I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't just an open definition. And so I hear support. What about, can we get feedback from the council? I need to see everybody again. There we go. On Councilmember Robertson's proposal to add affordable to Amendment 5. Are there head nods or shakes for adding that? Councilmember Stokes, did you want to say something?
This is what I'm, yes.
Okay, okay, just want to make sure. And then we have a request for tracking success, checking to see that we're meeting a goal. I know that the county is putting forward goals for our cities, and I know our city has our own goal. So there's a request for that. And I like this idea of checking for tenant experience, and maybe that's something we can ask Arch to look into for us. So can we include Councilmember Robertson's change and then these two things that Councilmember Barksdale asked for? It doesn't go into the the proposed amendments, but just as a direction.
Yeah, so in summary, Councilmember Robertson would like to add the word affordable between unit, and by doing that, you would capitalize affordable unit if that's that's kind of a code writing detail, but it'd be affordable unit as kind of a term of art. And yeah, we are clear about the interest and direction to do monitoring and metrics. So we don't need to do a code add for that, but that would be work that we'd be doing moving forward. So we're on the same page on that front as well.
All right, thank you. So the question now is, we have these proposed amendments, one with a minor edit to it, and just want to make sure with Kathy Gerla and Charmaine that these are simple enough that we could vote in tonight.
Yes, you can move forward with this tonight.
Okay, perfect. All right, are there any more comments or questions? If you raise your hand, I'll see you. Not seeing any. Is there a motion to make the amendments and approve this ordinance?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor.
I move to adopt ordinance 6582, amended to reflect the 6 amendments as put forward by the Bellevue Chamber, including the clarifying comments by Mayor Robinson and Councilmember Robertson.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, great. Thank you. That's a great accomplishment. Congratulations, everybody. Okay, with that, we're going to take a celebratory break, and we're going to come back at 5 to 8. So 7:55. I will see you then. So we do have a quorum here. So let's go ahead onto the street vacation. It's not summer vacation. Can you go ahead and introduce Mr. Miyake?
Yes, ma'am. Mayor and council members, the public hearing in front of you this evening is on a requested vacation of a dead-end portion of Southeast First Street between Bellevue Way and 105th Avenue Southeast. This street vacation is being requested as part of a redevelopment on the adjacent properties. This matter was last in front of council on May 5th of this year, where council initiated the street vacation process and set tonight's public hearing date. Following the public hearing, if the council would, at the council's discretion, council be asked to direct staff on whether to proceed with drafting legislation to finalize the street vacation. So joining us this evening is Ira McDaniel, real property manager with the city's finance and asset management department. Ira?
Thank you, Mr. Miyake, and good evening, Mayor and council members. Can everyone see the presentation?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Great. So tonight I'll provide a brief staff report, after which council will hold a public hearing. Following the hearing, we'll seek your direction on whether to proceed with vacating this dead-end portion of Southeast First Street. So it's been a while since our last street vacation, a couple of years, so I'll provide an overview of the process and the procedure. So a street vacation is a formal process by which the city can abandon a public road right-of-way, which then reverts by operation of law to private property. The process is dictated by state law and city code. The process starts with an adjoining owner filing a petition to vacate the road. City staff then review the petition to ensure that it's complete and that no city departments have an objection to the vacation. A resolution is then adopted by council, setting a date for the public hearing, and then prior to the hearing, public notice is issued. Tonight, we're holding the hearing to allow the public an opportunity to comment on the proposed street vacation. If council provides direction to staff to proceed with the remainder of the process, staff will work with the adjoining owner to ensure all conditions of the vacation are met before bringing an ordinance back to council for final action. City code provides specific criteria for council to consider when making their decision to proceed. If affirmed, the first 4 criteria on this list would support moving forward with the vacation. And these are whether the vacation will better serve the public good, whether the street is no longer required for public use, whether the cost of maintaining the road is greater than the public benefit of keeping the road, and whether a different route for the road would be more beneficial to the public. Weighing against these factors, council should also consider the bottom two, which are whether conditions may change in the future such that the road would serve a better public purpose than it does today, and whether or not any of the adjoining owners adjoining to the vacation area oppose the street vacation. I'll put this slide back up following the public hearing and highlight the factors that staff believe are most pertinent to council's decision. And when council makes its motion to give staff direction, they should call out the specific criteria that factored into their decision. The portion of Southeast First Street that is the subject of tonight's hearing is located adjacent to the property at 100 Bellevue Way Southeast, near the intersection of Bellevue Way and Main Street. And this slide shows the specific area to be vacated in red. The right-of-way for Southeast First Street used to extend through to the east to 105th Avenue Southeast, but that east portion of the road was vacated in 1965, leaving this as an unimproved dead-end road. This segment of the right-of-way presently serves as a private driveway between the adjoining parcels to the north and south, as well as a driveway to the property located to the northeast. And the petitioner owns all three of these parcels and plans to incorporate the vacated road into their development of the adjoining property. Staff do not have any plans to improve this segment of the road right-of-way for the public use in the future. And over the years, the city has received requests from the surrounding owners to perform maintenance on the road right-of-way. Given that we don't have a future plan for the street, staff feels the cost of maintaining does outweigh the benefit of retaining the road. And to this point, staff have received no objection from any of the adjacent owners. If council approves moving forward with the vacation, staff will bring back an ordinance for final approval following satisfaction of several conditions. An easement will need to be put on title to ensure continued access to the parcel to the northeast of the vacation area. The petitioner will also need to execute easements with the franchise utilities that are in the vacation area, or they'll need to relocate the utilities out of the area. And they'll also need to pay the city for the appraised fair market value of the vacation area. Following the public hearing, staff requests council's direction on whether to proceed with drafting legislation to approve the street vacation. This ends the staff report. Are there any questions before opening the public hearing?
Well, I think we'll open the public hearing and listen to any comments, close it, and then ask for any questions or comments from council. So are you ready for that?
Yes.
Okay. Deputy Mayor, could you make a motion, please?
Certainly, I move to open the public hearing.
Is there a second? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Clerk, do we have anybody signed up for comment?
Thank you, Mayor. There are no pre-registered speakers for this public hearing, although I will mention for the record that you did receive one written comment for the public hearing, which was included in your desk packet. So at this time, I would ask if there is anyone connected to this call who would like to make a comment during this public hearing. Please raise your hand or use *9 if connected with the phone. And Mayor, there are no hands.
Okay. Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
I move to close the public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Are there any comments or questions on this? Go ahead and raise your hand if you have one. Okay, I'm not seeing any. So is there a motion to direct staff to draft legislation approving the requested street vacation?
Certainly, Mayor. I move to direct staff to prepare legislation for adoption at a future meeting, approving the street vacation of a portion of Southeast First between Bellevue Way Southeast and 105th Avenue Southeast, finding that the street is no longer required for public use and the public benefit of retaining the street does not justify the cost of maintenance.
Second.
Did you, I'm sorry if I missed it. Did you allude to the B and C?
Correct, I did. Criteria
did, good.
B and criteria C, yes.
Okay, great, thank you. And I heard a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, great, moving on. We have 3 study session items. Mr. Miyake.
Oh, good evening, Mayor, council members. The first item on your study session agenda this evening is an informational briefing on the Harborview Medical Center which is a comprehensive healthcare facility, which is owned by King County. Tonight, you'll hear from Interim Chief Executive Officer Summer Wally, and Harborview Board of Trustees President Stephanie Fain about Harborview's services and response to the COVID-19 pandemic. This is, as I mentioned, an informational update. We will hear from the Interim Chief Executive as well as the President of the Harborview Board of Trustees. With that, I was going to turn it over to Lacey Jane for any additional comments she may want to make before we turn it over to our guests.
Good evening, Council. I had no additional comments from me tonight. I am very much looking forward to hearing from Summer and Stephanie on this item. Thank you.
Welcome, Summer and Stephanie.
Thank you so much, Mayor Robinson, council members. I want to say a special thank you to all of you for giving us an opportunity to talk to you a little bit about Harborview, what's happened over the last year, and what is going on in the future of Harborview. I also want to take a moment to thank Councilmember Stokes for seeing us do the same presentation at the Regional Policy Committee for King County and asking us also to come here. So very privileged and humbled to be able to talk about Harborview. Again, my name is Summer Wally. I am the Interim Chief Executive Officer here at Harborview. However, I'm not new to Harborview. I have worked here for well over 20 years in both clinical and leadership capacities. My counterparts tonight are Stephanie Fain, our board president, and Stephanie Fain, our board president. Okay, next slide. I was waiting for the next slide to pop up. I apologize. Okay, again, thank you for welcoming us to this meeting. We're going to talk a little bit today about our Overlake partnership that Harborview has, very strong, long-standing partnership with Overlake, and I would be remiss if I didn't take a moment to talk about what the great contributions Overlake has to Bellevue and the community surrounding Bellevue. We're going to talk a little bit about the future of Harborview, particularly around the bond measure, planning and execution around the bond and the money that just passed through the King County action that happened recently, the vote. We're going to talk about Harborview's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, our initial response, vaccines, and how we've really worked on equity and community partnerships throughout this pandemic. And then I'm going to talk to you lastly about our Behavioral Health Institute, as behavioral health continues to be one of the greatest crises we see and something that is near and dear to everyone, particularly as you've been talking tonight about housing crises and different things like that. The Behavioral Health Institute has a lot on the horizon for helping individuals in marginalized populations. Next slide. Okay. So first of all, as you all know, not only are we living through the greatest heat wave we've ever had here in the region, and I will have to say I'm in my office here at Harborview, and we are in pretty dire straits right now. We have shut down most of our power so we can conserve, and that includes my office. So there is no air conditioning and there is no fan going. So very hot this evening. So not only are we living through this heat crisis, but we've lived through the greatest public health crisis of our lifetime, COVID-19. And Harborview's mission for providing healthcare to the most vulnerable has never been more important, not only to this area, to the region, county, but to the state and to the nation, as I'll talk about, as we really were at the forefront of the pandemic response. I, again, would be remiss if I didn't pause and say the success, though, of Harborview throughout this pandemic and just in general is really because of the strong partnerships and the many organizations and entities that support Harborview. So first of all, to the King County Executive and Council, King County voters, as they've supported us through this bond process that you're going to hear about tonight, which is going to allow Harborview to take a large sum of capital funds that we would never have been able to have and build infrastructure to support the region, not only as our level 1 trauma center for the region and for a 4-state radius, but also as our infectious disease epicenter, right? So this bond has really allowed us to provide the type of infrastructure and resources that our region will need if and when, and I think we're more on the when realm now, the next pandemic becomes apparent. Our board of trustees, our labor partners, UW Medicine, and then most of all, our Harborview staff and providers who give tirelessly to the mission and to the patients and population we serve. Next slide. Okay, I wanted to pause a minute and just say thank you to Overlake. Overlake is a really great partner for Harborview. Overlakes are the East Side's level 3 trauma center. Harborview is a level 1. Overlake is our level 3 trauma center, but even more importantly, Overlake is a part of the infrastructure of the King County's Disaster Medical Coordination Center. And that really is the infrastructure which Harborview partners with the rest of the state to ensure whenever we have some type of disaster. Now, typically we've always thought of that in a natural or man-made disaster. Most recently, it was a pandemic, infectious disease disaster, but Overlake and Harborview partner. And what happens is if something happens to Harborview and we are not able to be the point to distribute all patients across the region to ensure all patients get care and that the hospitals are equally level loaded, Overlake takes on that role. So really important, really key collaboration. We do a ton of drills together. And we really focus a lot on working closely with both our ED doctors and our specialty physicians. I would also like to say that our really important trauma infrastructure that we have here in the state of Washington, which has incredible outcomes, Overlake was at the table with Harborview when that was created. So very proud to say that Overlake plays a key role and we definitely appreciate the support they give us. Next slide. So wanted to go a little bit into this bond program. So $1.74 billion was passed by the King County voters. So pause to thank each and every one of you for your support. This allows us to have about 650,000 new square feet on the campus of Harborview. And then additionally to renovate another 550 to 600,000 square feet. That new infrastructure is going to provide us with a new bed tower, new emergency department with helipad on top. So patients can drop in as a level 1 trauma center and go straight into the emergency department. It's going to provide us with single patient rooms, which is something we haven't had consistently throughout the hospital and never became more apparent as the infectious disease epicenter than it was during the pandemic. And then many other renovations that we will be able to support. Next slide. So I'm going to pause a minute and allow Stephanie Fain, our board president, and then Kelly Carroll, our special director in the executive Constantine's office, to provide us with an update on where we are with the bond and kind of what the next steps are and how the county is partnering with Harborview in this process.
Good evening, Mayor Robinson and council members. Thank you again for inviting us to speak to you tonight. It's wonderful to see several familiar faces here. As you can imagine, there are many activities that need to take place in order to execute a capital bond, a capital improvement project of this magnitude. Leslie Harper Miles was recently hired as the bond program office director and is leading this effort. Leslie was hoping to join us tonight but could not attend. So as you heard, Kelly Carroll, fortunately, is available to answer your specific questions about the bond program if you have any. Kelly Carroll is Director of Special Projects at the Office of King County Executive Dow Constantine. So right now, King County, in partnership with Harborview and UW Medicine, is hard at work on the planning and sequencing activities necessary to launch the bond-funded improvements at Harborview. The top priority is ensuring that operations at Harborview continue with minimal disruption during the years of construction ahead. The overarching project management RFP selection process has begun, and we expect a firm to be on board by early fall. Other steps and activities include developing robust community engagement and small business plans. Excuse me, my 5-year-old would like to participate. Just a minute, please. Drafting sequencing options and developing pre-design elements. Next slide, please. A bond program oversight committee has been formed to advise and make recommendations on construction-related policy decisions. excuse me. I'm so sorry.
Sorry, roll that good.
My apologies. We are multitasking here tonight. So this committee includes representatives from the Executive's Office, the King County Council, Harborview and UW Medicine Leadership, and the Harborview Board of Trustees. Our first meeting took place on May 13th, and we expect to meet quarterly through 2022 as the foundational elements are set up to support the multiple phases of design and construction. Meetings will be more frequent as projects get underway. And if there are no questions about the bond program, I will turn it back over to Summer to talk about the clinical planning process. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. And feel free to interrupt me anytime. Kelly will stay on with me. And as I talk about clinical strategic planning, we'll be talking about further bond stuff. So feel free anytime to interrupt with questions for Kelly. Next slide, please. Okay, so the future of Harborview. So as the county, led by Leslie and Kelly is working really hard on the infrastructure piece of the bond and the planning. Harborview and UW Medicine are working very diligently on figuring out and looking at our clinical strategic planning process for having this new infrastructure. So really looking at what the community needs, both internal and external stakeholders, really figuring out what it is that the community needs from Harborview in order to ensure that the health of the public and the health of the most marginalized mission population that we serve in King County is taken care of, not just 3 years from now, 4 years from now, 5 years from now, but 20 years from now. So how do we use this money to ensure that the infrastructure we build at Harborview will last? We are also getting input and participation from frontline staff and providers. Most importantly, as I said, this money will be used for single patient rooms and a new bed tower with a new state-of-the-art world-class emergency department as a level 1 trauma center. That is extremely important, along with a behavioral health building and other wraparound services that the county will be helping and partnering with us on. As a transition though, one of the things we're doing at Harborview that I want to make sure everyone is aware of is working on a bridge plan to increase our single patient room capacity. And this is really important because, as you know, Harborview is where you go with most infectious diseases. And we've always been extremely good at taking care of those patients. However, you can only imagine during the pandemic, it really limits us in our numbers of beds. When you have double patient rooms, and you have somebody with an infectious disease, you can only put one into that room, right? You can't put double patients in. So we are working to increase our capacity through the creation of 40 new single patient rooms. We're going to do this within 3 phases, and we're funding this through $75 million of Harborview's own capital or own operating dollars. So a big push for Harborview. As you all know, we function off a very slim margin, but extremely important in order to be able to provide what the community needs in the meantime while we're working to build the new infrastructure with the bond. Next slide. Okay, I want to talk about COVID and what happened over the last year and kind of Harborview's role that we played, but also just kind of what happened in the community. So if we think about the pandemic response, Harborview was one of the first. I remember the first call that came in from the nursing home that was first impacted. We were all sitting in our emergency operations center at Harborview and listening to that first call for help as the disaster management control center. So we were really there from the beginning. We provided the first strike teams that went into homes as individuals were coming off of planes and other suspected individuals of possible COVID-19 exposures were happening. Next slide. So as part of our COVID response, initially we mobilized very quickly, just like all the other hospitals did. The one confounding thing that Harborview needed to do was to ensure that we not only continued to play our part as a level 1 trauma center, but also take care of the pandemic patients. So most hospitals were able to kind of stop a lot of operations that were happening in order to kind of provide resources for the pandemic. We didn't at Harborview. We continue to fill our entire capacity as a level 1 and take care of the region's most sick COVID patients. We did this in a way that we kept equity at the forefront of everything we did. So we really thought about how best to reach our vulnerable population and our mission population. Next slide. One of the other things that we provided to the region and the state is we have formed the Washington Medical Coordination Center, which is in partnership with the state and really helps all hospitals across the state of Washington with level loading. I will have to say that we have had this up since last April, and we probably have never been as busy as we are over the last 2 weeks. And that is not with COVID patients. That is with the healthcare system being completely overloaded, likely with delayed healthcare and now the heat wave. We are staffing it 24/7, ensuring that we're helping particularly rural hospitals be able to get patients into higher level facilities like an Overlake or a UW-MC or Harborview to get care. So we started out as the COVID loading center, but unfortunately over the last 2 to 3 weeks, we have had to pivot very quickly into helping the entire region with how we deal with an influx of very sick patients into our hospitals. Next slide. So lastly, for COVID, the initial response, I just kind of wanted to focus on our own very own Dr. John Lynch. You probably all saw him on the news very often. He really was the first resource and the first infectious disease expert in the country that was on point, because he was the one seeing a lot of the first responses. And he led this response for UW Medicine and was sat at the table at the state level. And he is our infectious disease chief at Harborview. And so very near and dear to our hearts, and also an incredible individual from the pandemic perspective. He won big awards at the University of Washington level for how he responded during this pandemic. Next slide. We saw some hope. We saw some hope in December and January when vaccines came out, just like all the other hospitals. All of a sudden there was some hope on the horizon. Can see pictures of exciting things, but also staff being extremely overwhelmed by having that first shot go in. But we, again, utilized our resources with an equity forefront. Our vaccine approach has been multimodal. So we not only offer vaccines within our footprint of our hospital to those that are most marginalized and to the general population, but we also have mobile vaccine teams. We have community vaccine clinics, and we have specialized clinics at Harborview targeting different ethnic backgrounds, different patients with different languages, things that need, or individuals that need more of a reach out and a pull to help them get the education they need to see the safety in the vaccine. Next slide. We've also had a lot of support from donors, and I'm very thankful. The Paul Allen Foundation and the Mariners have really helped us. This has been a pretty costly endeavor for us to have this equity effort on our mobilization through vaccinations. We have a lot of strike teams that are out every day in what we call vaccination deserts. We use a lot of data that comes in from the county to figure out where the highest rates of COVID remain and the lowest vaccination rates are. And then we ensure that we're getting in there with our mobile vaccinations and with our community partnerships to try to ensure that people are getting education, understand the benefits of the vaccine, and that we really improve the vaccination rates for our whole community. Next slide. To date, we have administered over 350,000. This was as of June 24th as UW Medicine, and Harborview alone, as you can see how many we've administered. I think more importantly though, we're almost at the 8,000 mark for our mobile vaccination program, which, if you can imagine, you only get about 50 to 75 people every time you go out there. So that's a lot of work to capture populations that we really need to make sure are taken care of. Next slide. Lastly, I want to fill you in on behavioral health issues. So we do have a behavioral health institute at Harborview, in addition to all the cadre of behavioral health services that we provide at Harborview. And I wanted to give you a little update on some of the more innovative things we are doing and providing to the community. First of all, telebehavioral health. So as the pandemic broke out, one of the first things we did was partner with the state on developing and delivering an 18-session telehealth training series that met the state requirements for community-based behavioral health providers. So basically, we're able to get out there through digital platforms to ensure that we were able to provide behavioral health counselors, mental health counselors in the community on how to do mental health through a digital platform. And that was really key because that type of expertise and curriculum wasn't out there before. The pandemic forced us to become more innovative. We also are partnering with the executive's office along with some of our labor partners, SEIU 1199 on behavioral health apprenticeship programs. We are developing the curriculum while our labor partners are the ones out there helping deliver it. We have a very big footprint in the emergency response for suicide prevention. And then lastly, we have launched a specialized treatment for early psychosis program, which is new at Harborview and is serving, we're on track to serve almost 200% more over this past year than we did in previous years. So some really incredible work and incredible partnerships going on. Continue to need more of a footprint and continue to need all the community to be focused on how we ensure we're helping the behavioral health community. Next slide. Any questions for me or Kelly or Stephanie?
Well, thank you very much for that presentation. Does anybody have any comments or questions? We're so proud of Overlake Hospital, and it's made better for us because of its partnership with Harborview. You provide amazing services to our community, and I just want to thank you for that and for the great work that you do for the whole region.
Absolutely. Thank you for acknowledging that.
Councilmember Zahn.
Yeah, I just wanted to say what a treasure to have Harborview. So we're really excited for the work that you do. I have one comment and then one question. Yeah. So my comment is I'm super excited about the mailing single patient rooms. I understand that last month you got approval from CPARB to hire progressive design builders. So I wish you all the best to get that project underway. Yeah. Like it's going to finish in the end of 2024. So we look forward to hearing about that successful project. And then my question is, I love the apprenticeship pipeline for behavioral health. What I was curious about is whether there's a potential partnership with Bellevue College for students that might be able to develop a program in behavioral health. I know that they have a really popular nursing program that other countries have wanted to learn about that's unique to Bellevue College. So I just wondered if the behavioral health piece is one that there's a potential partnership, or if you've already contemplated that.
My partner, Kelly Carroll, is extremely involved in this work with us, and I am going to let her answer this question. And I agree, Bellevue has had an incredible nursing partnership with us. Kelly?
Good evening, council members. Good evening, Madam Mayor. Thank you for that question, council member. I am pleased to say we would be delighted. And when I say we, it's a very large consortium of folks and groups involved in developing the behavioral health apprenticeship. And I'd be happy to facilitate connections with Bellevue College and the Multi-Employer Training Fund, which is the backbone organization developing this. Mm-hmm. We are excited to partner with any college that wants to step up.
Well, that's good to know. We'll pass that along. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, Lynn.
Yes, Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you very much. This is exciting, and you came a lot quicker than I thought you'd be able to, so that's good. It's good timing. Yeah, we're just all very excited about, and it's been a great learning lesson about what our hospitals do in this pandemic, and in conjunction with our firefighters and all the responders and everything, how it all just seamlessly fits together. We have a great system, and it's because of the things you're doing. I mean, the attitude of working together and reaching out and just talking about the colleges and everything is fantastic. So we just have a great network, and we're as we're saying, we're really proud to be part of that and to have a great hospital here, and to know. And I thought I bet a lot of people don't know how much, how Overlake is connected with Harborview and how it all fits in. So I think it's just fascinating, and I really appreciate your coming and talking to us about it and helping us to understand it. And we'll keep supporting moving forward on this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Council Member. One additional thing is Fire Chief Hagan is very close to many individuals at Harborview and is a great partner also. So
good.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for the presentation and for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to move on because we've got a lot of more work ahead of us.
Can I say a few things? I got my hands raised.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were waving. Sorry. Go ahead, Councilmember Lee.
I just want to say that Harborview is a tremendous responsibility. You are our regional hospital to take care of lots of emergencies. And then we have reputation. We don't turn back anybody. You don't. And we completely sort of depend on you without really appreciating. So I want to make sure appreciate you coming to us and what you support to the region and the community hospital like Overlake. Obviously, it's very important. Without you, it would be very challenging. Another personal level is my wife worked for University of Washington Hospital for 40 years. So she has a lot of connection, laboratory medicine. So with Harborview, lots of doctors and administrators and all sorts. So we recognize the important role that you play. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Lee.
Councilmember Robertson, you were also waving your hand, and I didn't know if you were waving or had a question.
Tonight. Great presentation. Love Harborview. Was happy to vote.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Bye.
All right, next thing up, Mr. Miyake, would you like to introduce this land use code amendment?
Sure. Good evening, Mayor Robertson, council members. Tonight, staff will be introducing a complete draft of the land use code amendment, which will create a new part in the land use code for the East Main station area. Staff has prepared this draft code based on council vision and policies in the comp plan for East Main, as well as council direction from last July. In addition to the draft code, staff will also provide a collated list of outstanding stakeholder requests and staff's notations of possible adjustments. You did hear from 2 stakeholders under public comment this evening. This was last in front of you back in July of 2020. Tonight, staff are seeking council's direction to schedule a public hearing on the land use code, as well as identify topics in the draft land use code that council would like additional information in future study sessions. Joining us this evening are Mike Brennan, Director, Trisna Tanis, Consulting Attorney, both from the Development Services Department, and Emil King, Assistant Director of Community Development Department. With that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Miyake. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Neuenhouse, and council members. As Mr. Miyake mentioned, we are here this evening to introduce a complete draft of the land use code amendments for the East Main planning area. The draft included in tonight's agenda packet is aligned with the vision and policy direction that the council has provided, and it sets the path for future transit-oriented development near the East Main Light Rail Station, a significant public investment. Next slide, please. So tonight we are seeking council direction on two areas. First, as Mr. Miyake mentioned, we are asking the council to direct staff to set the public hearing that is a required step in the land use code amendment process, and with the goal of holding that hearing before the council goes on August break. So we want to keep this moving along as quickly as we can. And next, secondly, we are asking the council to identify the topic areas of the code where staff can provide you with additional information to assist in your deliberations at the upcoming study sessions. And the plan is to begin those study sessions following the public hearing and do those in sequence as quickly as we can bring the information back to the council. Next slide, please. So the agenda for tonight's presentation very quickly is really to discuss quickly an overview of where we are in the process and the timeline. We'll look at a review of the outreach that was conducted during the code development process. and an overview of the vision of the East Main transit-oriented development area, and a description of the code topics and goals that make up the East Main Land Use Code amendments. And finally, a summary of the requests from stakeholders for revisions to the draft. Next slide, please. So the current, where we are currently in the timeline is reflected in the text box with study session number 3. And it shows key milestones in the overall process since the beginning of last year. And I'll note here that there's been an extensive amount of discussion with stakeholders that led up to both the publication of the draft late last year and then subsequent amendments up to and including the most recent version that is before the council this evening. The text box also shows that we have a couple of items that we are looking for your direction on, as I noted, regarding the public hearing and direction on topics. Also, study sessions, as you look ahead on this timeline, future study sessions are really at the discretion of the council. We want to continue to provide the council with the information you need for your deliberations to reach a place where you're comfortable moving to the final adoption process. And again, we are hoping to understand where your interests are this evening so we can provide you that information. I'll hand it over here to Emil King, and he'll discuss the outreach that's been conducted for the East Main Land Use Code, as well as elements of the vision for this area. Emil?
Thank you, Mike. I'd like to please go into some detail on the outreach and engagement conducted so far for the East Main LUCA. During the LUCA process, we've engaged with property owners within the East Main TOD area. This has included Wig Properties, Bellevue Athletic Club, and J&J Bellevue, who owned land just east of the Bellevue Club. This interaction has been very beneficial to help sort out some of the outstanding issues and also identify those issues where additional work may be desired by council. The Surrey Downs neighborhood, which lies on the west side of 112th Avenue Southeast, has also engaged in the process. They're following issues such as building height and traffic, and also reiterating the need for neighborhood serving uses in the TOD. We've also fielded questions in formal and informal settings from the business community and others in Bellevue about East Main. There's considerable interest in East Main regarding where it stands in the process and how it will springboard to other TOD work in the city. As with all our major projects, staff is continuing to update the East Main webpage to inform the public about this LUCA. Next slide, please. It's important to reiterate the vision for the East Main TOD area. The goals and policies adopted by council in 2019 call for creating a new urban neighborhood. Terms such as vibrant, livable, memorable are used in the plan. This area will benefit greatly from the regional light rail investment that is planned to open for service just 2 years from now. The vision for East Main as a TOD neighborhood is to have a range of uses. Those mentioned specifically in the plan are a variety of housing choices, offices, hotel, and supporting commercial uses. How people get around the East Main area is also envisioned to change in the future. The vision is for a highly walkable and bikeable area in and around the station with supporting open spaces and amenities. Next slide, please. I want to just take a moment to recap the direction staff received from council in July 2020 regarding the East Main LUCA. The direction was to use the downtown OLB South land use code as the starting place for the East Main LUCA and be consistent with the East Main comprehensive plan policies that were adopted in 2019. OLB South is the area north of East Main within downtown Bellevue that's bordered by Main Street, Northeast 4th, and 112th and 405. Council also provided clear direction to ensure pedestrian bicycle connectivity and affordable housing incentives are addressed, and to incorporate the 4 points that are shown on the screen. These relate to number one, the framework for the pre-located street that runs east-west from 112th to 114th, the approach from downtown of using a term called alleys with addresses for the potential streets, Third, to expand the definition of active uses, which are the ground level uses that help enliven the pedestrian environment. And finally, that the parking, which is governed by minimums and maximums, that we reduce the minimum parking ratios and also allow the same maximums as the downtown. Next slide, please. East Main provides an opportunity to marry together zoning increases for properties within the station area with the public benefits that are going to further some of the city's policy objectives. This graphic is intended to show the general relationship between the zoning increases and public benefits. The East Main area, currently zoned for fairly low densities or FARs. You can think of FARs as how much development can be accomplished on a site based on its size. For this graphic, we're showing an example for office uses of having a current allowable FAR of 0.5. You can see that in the dark blue section there. For residential, it's roughly 0.75 FAR, about 30 units per acre that are allowed. So as included in the East Main draft, we have proposed a base FAR that is above what the current FARs are. We're proposing a base FAR of 2.5 for non-residential development and 3.5 FAR for residential development. This level of development would be of a scale to further the economic development interest of the city, deliver on the housing needs we face, and also capitalize on the Eastlink investment. So you can see the included with base FAR in the medium colored green are the elements that come along with development at the base FAR with the upzone. And as we talk about the maximum FARs, so in this example, 5 FAR for non-residential and 5 for residential, this is where we get into the incentive system, which is the voluntary system that developers can use to reach the maximums. And the developers do benefit by the additional development capacity, and in exchange, there's public benefits that come along with that ability to reach the max FARs. The items that we're listing out in the lighter color green are the amenities in the draft code at the top tier or most important level. And these include affordable housing, childcare, open space, and potential streets. So with that, I'd like to hand things over to Trisna to continue with the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Emil. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor, and council members. So for these 2 slides, I'd like to explain and clarify the role of the various documents in the process. The progression is from a very high level in the comprehensive plan down to the specific design details and development application and review. So the comprehensive plan sets the vision and policies. The priorities are high level and broad in nature. It's intentionally flexible so that there is room for the land use code to maneuver and be responsive to those vision and priorities that have been set. The land use code in turn is more specific. The provisions in the code implement the vision and policy priorities, includes requirements, standards, and guidelines. And lastly, the development application and review included the specific design a developer is proposing, which the city reviews for compliance with the code. There are many different designs that will comply with the code and be consistent with the comprehensive plan. And it's up to the developer and their design team to make that proposal, certainly with our guidance and assistance in the review side of it. So as an example, here in the context of affordable housing, we have a policy that says that we should establish a land use incentive system that prioritizes affordable housing. So the top priority in the land use code to implement this policy, the amenity system, the incentive system has a focus on affordable housing. So it would say a residential development would earn 75% or more of the project's amenity points from affordable housing. And in the development application or proposal that we would review, then the developer would propose a certain amount of square feet of residential development, certain amount of affordable housing development to earn a certain amount of bonus floor area. So based on that framework on how the land use code fits into the overall process, and as you've just heard from from Emil, we are introducing to council tonight a draft code for East Main that includes requirements, standards, and guidelines that implement the overall vision and priorities for East Main. We have categorized these requirements, standards, and guidelines into 3 topics: urban form, housing, and code structure. Under urban form, we have requirements, standards, and guidelines to achieve walkable blocks, to emphasize pedestrian-friendly and scaled environment, to focus on neighborhood-serving uses, as Emil mentioned earlier, and to include pedestrian and bicycle paths and accessibility, as well as vehicular connection and connectivity to the future light rail station. We've reduced the parking requirements as council directed last summer. And the requirements, standards, and guidelines also ensure what is to be built will be complementary to downtown, as well as the neighboring single-family area to the west. And lastly, but certainly not least, the requirements, standards, and guidelines will also achieve an urban form in the future East Main that includes affordable housing, childcare services, open space, and potential streets as the top tier priorities in the incentive system. The draft code also includes requirements, standards, and guidelines for housing-related vision and priorities, such as minimum housing requirement and a higher base density, as Emil talked about earlier, for residential development. Again, to ensure that a variety of housing sizes, and it also addresses different income levels. And affordable housing is a priority in the draft code. The draft code has also been written as part of the overall land use code, with consistency in how the framework of that code, as well as with other city codes and processes. In other words, the requirements, standards, and guidelines in the draft code have been written so that they can be successfully administered by development services staff in order to achieve the built outcome that council has set as its vision for East Main. As you also heard earlier from Mike, staff has worked with us, our stakeholders, for many months. We shared the draft code at the end of last year, and we've made some changes where they've aligned with what council has told us before. So the list that you see on the slide is a simplified version of what has been included in the attachment in your agenda packet. So we have listed these requests in the slide in the same categories as what we just talked about earlier: urban form, housing, and code structure. Our read of these requests is that we need further direction from council, which is why they are not yet in the draft code. Within the urban form category, the requests include increasing the maximum building height, eliminating step backs and reduction in floor plates for residential towers below 80 feet, and expanding the exceptions for block size requirements. For housing, stakeholders are looking to reduce the minimum housing requirement to accept condominiums as affordable at 100% AMI, and then to allow fee in lieu instead of building affordable housing on site. And lastly, under code structure, the requests are to expand the exceptions for non-conforming uses and to add the use of development agreements to depart or vary or receive something that is not in the code. So with that, I will turn it back to Mike. Mike?
Thank you, Trisna. So again, Mayor and Council, the direction that we are seeking from the Council this evening is to schedule the public hearing for the draft land use code amendment, and then to identify topics or areas where the Council would like additional information as you begin your deliberations and explore the code. The land use code can be kind of a complicated and confusing thing, and we want to make sure we're providing you the information so that you develop an understanding of this particular land use code amendment where you're comfortable making that final decision on the adoption. So looking for any information that you can provide us this evening, and not foreclosing on future requests for information, say following the public hearing. But if we can get a running start on some of the organizing and collecting of any work that we need to have done for information we want to get going on that. So with that, I'll hand it back to the mayor.
Okay, thank you. So there's a lot of material here, and really what we're just looking for is at the end of this discussion, can we advance this to a public hearing on the land use code amendment? And can we identify some topics here that staff can have a discussion with us on? Yeah, Mr. Miyake, is your hand up? No, okay, you just, maybe that's my pointer. Oh, sorry. Okay, so I'm thinking that there can be a lot of discussion here, but we don't need to be redundant. If somebody has already represented a point of view, I think that's sufficient to have staff bring it back. So I would weigh in if something hasn't been mentioned yet that you want to have one of these brought back. Why don't we, do you think, Mike, it would be helpful to take these one by one and determine whether or not we're comfortable with the proposed adjustments, or if we want to have you come back and discuss it further?
So I think for us, if there are the stakeholder requests, if the council would like us to bring back information on a subset or all of those, let us know and we would organize those and set up that conversation for the council. If there are other topics that the council, outside of those requests, that the council would be interested in learning more about, that's introduced in this code, we're happy to do that as well. I do know that a lot of the focus will probably be on discussion of requested changes. So we need, maybe you could start there. Is there a subset or the collective whole? What would you like us to bring back for discussion? Might be a place to start.
Okay, so we have two stakeholders. We have the Bellevue Club and we have the Wigs. And so the stakeholders' names are in front of the number of the requests. So you have, we'll say Wig 1. This is the Wigs' first request. And does everybody have attachment C in front of them so they can, they know what I'm looking at? Or is everybody good with that? Okay, so is there anybody who wants to comment on whether they want staff to bring back number 1 to discuss or have an opinion on that? Yes, Councilmember Robertson.
Yes, so I'd like to step back for a second to talk about why I support this. We need, as we just did the MFTE and we heard from the people at the public hearing, we need a lot more housing. We also have growth targets for jobs. And this site, particularly the north end of this site, is right across from a light rail station. And we need to make sure that it is developed to help the city achieve its vision for growth. Councilmember Stokes is known for saying, go big or go home. I think that this is one of the opportunities to do that. How often does a city get to zone a piece of land, this assemblage this big in right on the edge of our downtown, next to a light rail station, that's really going to affect almost no one, as long as it doesn't affect the neighbors across the street because it's got a freeway on the other side, and really provide the capacity for the jobs and the housing that we're looking for. I mean, we're so lucky in Bellevue that we have this among the many opportunities that are presented to us. So I think that if we do not increase the height allowance here, we will not get the residential we need. We will not get the office we need. We will not, and remember, FAR decides how dense a site is. Height combined with FAR decides how much open space there's going to be between the density. So if we have a higher height limit, we're going to have a lot more open space. We're going to have visual space between the towers. So to me, making the height higher makes a whole lot of difference. And I really would like to see the council give direction on this and FAR tonight, at least not direction, but what we're willing to, how big we're willing to explore, because staff may need to, there was a determination of non-significance under SEPA issued for this plan, but they may need to adjust the checklist and maybe issue a new one or maybe do an addendum. And that's going to take probably, I mean, staff can weigh in, probably 90 days or so to go through it. So if we're interested in going big or going home, we need to let them know sooner rather than later so we don't delay final adoption of the code. So that was a long-winded say, but you called on me first. I won't repeat these comments on other topics, but yes, I think we should look at a max height of 400, 420 with mechanical, the 125 to 145 with mechanical in the middle area, and the 70 to 90 in the near 112th area, as proposed by the WIGs. And I'd like to make sure that that's something that we can adopt in a timely manner. So if we need to reopen SEPA, let's do it.
Thank you. Okay, is there anybody else who wants to add to that? Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, I think I would like to add that too. I think, yes, go big is, I'm trying to figure out, I think we need to figure out what going big is and what it means, but I would like us to take a look at that and also consider the recommendation in green here, tied to one thing that we're going to get to somewhere along the way, but I want to talk about this first. This is TOD. We just got through talking about affordable housing. We've had this huge response from the total community and the business community, and everybody knows we really have to address that issue, and we need to do it everywhere we can. So I'm willing to look at, I don't think going to max height that we have at the beginning is the limit. But my concern and what I really want to find out more about, particularly in terms of what do we get for going another 100 feet or so.
So how can affordable housing trigger the increased height? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think that, you know, it's this whole situation of what are the benefits, and if 400 or 300 is something we can do, and SEPA is, and I appreciate Councilor Robertson mentioning that we have to look at that. But I think by itself, keeping these in our own bucket is not necessarily the best way to approach this. So I'm looking at how can we get something that that really makes the vision they have. And I've always along the line thought that this particular property has great opportunities for us, but it's not just how much can the developer do, how much can we put on that land. You know, we can go 600, you know, if we're playing like we're downtown. So, you know, we had to struggle to get we had to go through a whole process to get from 400 feet to 600 feet downtown. So there is, and you have to be within the terms of the comprehensive plan. We have to look at the land use code, all these factors. But I think that this is an area, and there are a couple of these other pieces in here where the council and the city has a very strong commitment to doing something, and that's called affordable housing, and that's where I really want to go big. And if we don't do it, there won't be any homes. So I'm willing to look at this, and I'd really like to look at how we can approach that. I'm willing to go to 300 feet, but going further than that, and I still think there has to be affordable housing, but going further than that, to me, is going to depend on how we can make this property be a real TOD property, how it can fit in with affordable housing, and how it's going to have an impact on other developments that are coming up. We're going to go across Wilburton, and we have to realize that whatever we do here is going to be looked at as a base other places. So this is a big change for Bellevue, and we're in a big change time. So I think we have to do this really well and make something that really satisfies everybody. And I think we can get there if we're all willing to sit down and talk about it, but not just kick something out just because we don't like it or we don't want to go there. So okay. I'm willing to add this. Frankly, I would like to have you come back on all of these and look at these.
We'll take it by one, but
I know,
on this one, I got your input, and I'm going to just interject here. I like what Councilmember Stokes is saying. How do we trigger these increased heights? And I'd like to look at how 80% AMI or even more affordable triggers it, because frankly, 100% AMI is not what I define as affordable housing. It is more affordable than 120% AMI, but that to me is not enough of a give back to trigger increased heights. So I would like staff to look at how we can get 80% AMI affordable housing in there and trigger some of the benefits of that, which would be increased height in my mind, as long as the SEPA allows it. What other comments or questions on the council members on?
I agree with both your comments and Councilmember Stokes. We want to encourage affordable housing and really incent for that. And I'm willing to go to much higher heights in order to get that. But I also agree that we need to make sure that the very values and the guiding principles that we establish for this to be a TOD neighborhood that is walkable and, you know, really a neighborhood that's connected with affordable, actually market rate and affordable housing. We only have so many truly TOD right across from the light rail station. And so we need to partner with the developers and the landowners to meet that vision. Thanks.
Okay, and then Councilmember Lee.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I agree with what Councilmember Robertson said, but I want to add on a little bit of perspective and also what's been just talked about. What I agree with Councilmember Robertson is that this is a major opportunity for us with such a big piece of land. And I think the stakeholder proponent has mentioned the opportunity of a gateway, and TOD is a tremendous opportunity also. I mean, we look at the light rail Main Street Station, we look at Surreytown Park, we look at the station itself, and we look at the entrance into Bellevue. It's just great opportunity. And I think the Surreytown neighborhood is really, getting to appreciate this. And so what they are proposing basically is, to accomplish all the goals you talk about, makes a lot of sense, affordable housing, more housing. But without the project, there's not going to be any housing. You have to have a project first. And in order to have a project, you got to make it economically feasible, right? And that's what they're asking about. They're asking for more heights, so you have more space, so you can have more income, so it's more sustainable. They know what to do. We can want whatever we want to as a government.
Councilmember Lee, can I ask you to get a little more concise in what you're adding that hasn't already been said?
I would be happy to give them the height they need, because that's just what they're asking to make it possible.
Okay.
And that's what it is.
All right. We've heard that already.
They get what they get. And then the proposal they made actually makes sense, because they are reducing the height, facing 112, which is, and also we're asking for open space. And by the way that they propose is give you a big open space, right? Facing the Tran TOD. And they're proposing TOD residential, they are, but except they said, well, we can make it with lower height. Why not? I don't care higher or lower height, as long as they provide residential units, as long as we can provide them, because it's economically feasible.
Okay.
So don't.
Thank you.
We just went through this multifamily, tax exempt. That's what it is. The builders, developers, partners are willing to work together so that they are willing to build the buildings, units. If they're not going to build, it's not economically feasible. We're just talking. We're going to have a piece of acres of land sitting there. That's not going to happen. So I agree with Councilman Robertson. We'll do whatever they're requesting. All the details we can work out. It will happen.
Okay, that's good.
It's going to happen.
But so we have 15 of these. and I'm not going to take 15 minutes for each one. So I'm going to ask that we shorten our comments and not be redundant, but I appreciate everybody's, expanding on things. That's very helpful. So are there any unique comments to one? Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. If I could, I just feel like we're getting just a little bit off track on this, and
I'm ready to move on to 4.
Well, good. Well, I think we should bring, first of all, I want to just commend staff for doing a great job to get us to this point. There has been so much work done, and I just want to acknowledge that. Thank you, Conrad. I appreciate that, but I'm going to mention it again, okay? So next thing I just want to mention is that the great collaboration between actually these 3 different stakeholders to get to some collaborative decisions on those areas in green. And that's fantastic. I think the ones that are in yellow, I think we should bring all that back, or if my colleagues have additional questions or follow up on that, certainly they should be reaching out to staff. But I think all of those we should bring back and have robust discussions on. In addition to that, what I saw a slight difference between kind of some of the outstanding issues that staff outlined versus some of the outstanding issues I think some of the stakeholders have. There seemed to be a little bit of a difference in terms of number of issues and what those issues are. I think it'd be great to have all of those on the table before we move this forward. And by the way, the initial question here is absolutely, I'm ready to move this forward to get to a public hearing. We definitely want to do that sooner than later, and I appreciate you pushing that to get that done before the summer break. And I have a couple of other things I'd love to see us also look into as well the next time when we do get into this a little bit deeper regarding the SEPA study, as well as the height that Councilmember Robertson and Stokes had mentioned already. And then the some of the other codes in terms of downtown compared to Bell Red. And then, raising the non-residential FAR and maximizing density, as this is TOD after all.
Okay,
and then,
Deputy Mayor.
Yes.
Please work with me here.
Absolutely,
just a little bit. Let's go to. I'll let you speak first on number 4, and you can start if you want to have staff bring that back and what you would like them to look at for that one.
Yes, Mayor. I would like them to bring that back.
Okay. And any particular comments on that?
No.
Okay. Does anybody else have a particular comment that on number 4 request? Because okay, Councilmember Zahn, go ahead.
My comment is somewhat number 4, but it's more broad, that on those ones where it is not recommended by staff as a change, I would like to better understand how it deviates from our guiding principles and our vision, so I can better understand what it is that we're voting for, because this talks a little bit about what it may do. But I think that we spent a lot of time developing our guiding principles, and I think it would be important to be really clear about when we are consistent with that and when we're not, what specifically is the impact and how it deviates from our vision.
Okay, that's a good feedback. I'm going to say one thing and then I'm going to toss it back to Councilmember Robertson. The one thing that I would like on number 4 is I want some assurance that if we were to make these changes, that the development is going to look like what's been proposed. I don't know how you do that in developer land, but we've seen situations where landowners upzone with a picture of what they say is going to be built. We think it looks great, and then they sell, and the developer comes in and does something different with the increased FAR, with the increased height. I want to make sure that, this is my opinion. I am interested in providing an opportunity for this developer to do what they are proposing to do, but I am not interested in giving carte blanche to a new developer who they might sell to do something entirely different that doesn't fit with, the vision that we have here. So you don't have to answer that tonight, but I'd like more information on that. And then Councilmember Robertson.
Mayor, you make a really good point. I guess one cross check that would be very useful as we move along is whether, and I think we've all seen the WIG's preferred site plan, which is a beautiful, beautiful proposal. I'd like a cross check on what, if anything, in the code as we move along would prohibit that or would confirm it. I think that's a great idea. I raised my hand to say that on the number 4, I would like to see both the WIG's request worked up, because the way the code is written now, you can go 80 feet high with no step back, but then as soon as you're 81 feet, all of a sudden the 40 feet between 40 and 80 have to be scooched in. And therefore you have less floor area, and maybe you don't even have as much if you go another 40, depending on the size. So what we want is we want more housing. We want more affordable housing. To the extent that that can be used for affordable housing, and modulation can be done another way. And I think that the design review requirements in the code as drafted, by the way, kudos to staff, the code is really, really close. But I'd like to see that because that's taking away floor area from housing. So, and I guess instead of go big or go home, it's go big to have more homes.
Yes.
Well said. All right, we have 13 more, and we're going to get through this. Is there any more unique comments or on this one, or can we move to number 7? Let's do 7. Any comments or question? Do you want to have that one brought back? And if so, what do you want to have discussed? Okay, Councilmember Robertson.
I just have a question. If the staff recommendation is they want to make this change in green and we don't ask for it to be brought back, will the change in green be made? Because I would support that. I don't think I need to talk about it though.
That's my assumption. Mike, is that how you're?
So yes, that could be the recommendation. I might suggest something that might help a little bit. We could organize kind of the future council discussions around, there's clearly housing is an issue, and a number of these has been mentioned affect housing and the ability to provide housing, or the requirement even to provide housing. So we could do set up a presentation that talks about the housing elements, including those recommended changes. So we would bring back all of these changes in an organized fashion, because I'm assuming from what I'm reading here that the council is going to be interested in talking about all of those that are listed in yellow here. The green ones we could package up as well and just go through those very quickly and say, this is the outcome, and just do a head nod on those. We can probably dispatch those fairly quickly, but I think it's important just to understand just what the changes are, so you understand what we're putting in the draft code. That way we can move, I think, relatively quickly to the big list, which is around housing. It's about the urban form that Councilmember Robertson was just talking about, and the pros and cons of making those adjustments if the council chooses to do so.
I think you're getting some good feedback from the council that's talking about specifics about the 80% AMI, the market rate housing, walkability, open space, guiding principles. I mean, this is good information, because then you have some idea of what to bring back to us.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying not to drag on and on here, but I appreciate the conversation.
Follow up.
Pardon?
If I could just follow up. So Mike, that personally works for me, except the green ones that we flag. Like height, we flagged that. So if we flag a green one, I definitely want it to come back.
Okay, Councilmember Zahn.
So I just want to confirm number 7 is about a bike path. So staff is saying that because of the topography and the steepness, we are saying no bike path, but there would be other pathways adjacent to these properties, so that you would, if you were a bicyclist, you would still be able to get around, but that we aren't actually requiring anything through the properties. Is that right? Just want to make sure I was clear about what this is actually saying.
Right, so there is a topography challenge here. So the pedestrian path between, and this would be an east-west running pedestrian path. So it would divide the site, provide easy access between 112th and 114th. We wouldn't require bicycle access there because of that topography, but bike access along 112, along the pre-located street and along the main street slip ramp would be where bicycles would travel, as well as across the street on the multi-purpose path that runs adjacent to the light rail station.
So why don't you bring back the implications for bikes with this one?
Thank you.
Okay, can we move on to 9? Does anybody want to have that come back and anything in particular? We're okay with staff's, well, I think we do want to bring that one back, Mike, but we won't, I guess we're not going to comment on it. How about, okay, I'm going to come back to the Bellevue Club. Okay, let's just do the Wig property first. So number 2, Wig's recommendation number 2 request. Does that, anybody have a comment or anything on that one? That will be coming back. Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Yes, I would like to see it come back.
Yeah. And yes, okay. How about number 5? We've already kind of covered that one. Yes.
Mayor, number 2, I just want to be clear, when we say come back, it means that we're going to talk about the implications.
Yes.
Because this is pretty significant.
We're not making any decisions tonight. Okay. We're just asking for more information, more time to talk about it. Okay, so number 5, we already have indicated that we want more conversation about that. What about the fee in lieu? I say bring that back for more conversation, please. Number 3, we want that to come back.
Mayor, you're referring to Wig 3 or
yes,
Bellevue
Wig
Club 3?
We're going to do Bellevue Club after. Okay. So Wig 3, are you okay with staff recommendation? Or you want to have a conversation on that? I'm okay with staff recommendation.
Mayor?
Yes.
Could I just ask one thing? I just want to make sure that it's clear, because there's several of these provisions through a DA, which I think is a great idea. I wish we'd have done a DA 5 years ago. But all of those I think should bring back, but we also need to kind of know why. I think it would be helpful.
Yeah, do that. Okay, and then number 6, I'm okay with staff change. We'll bring that back. Okay, how about 10? I think we're comfortable with staff recommendation on that one. Okay, so now I'm going to go to the Bellevue Club ones. So Bellevue Club 6 is the first one on my list. Is there any comments or questions on that? Bring back as Councilmember Stokes.
Well, let me ask another question before we go through all of these and then come back to it. Is why is it necessary to do the Bellevue Club work at the same time? Why can't we separate those two? I don't see any interconnectivity between the two. And if we could concentrate on the wigs and get that done, and then bring the Bellevue Club things back, because it's this switching back and forth, and it's like, why is it there? Why is it not there? We're talking about 2 different things and 2 different treatments. So I'd like to understand why we can't split these and be more efficient on it and maybe understand it better, because it does kind of confuse things. So I'd like to request.
Mike, can you, do you want to answer that now, or do you want to bring that back?
I can try. So there are some relationships. So on some like the non-conforming uses exception that they're looking for, there are some issues around exempting housing that has been a request by the Bellevue Club. So I think where there are relationships, it might be efficient to do them together, but there are some that stand by themselves. I agree with that as well.
But as it stands right now, if we were to just table the Bellevue Club discussion, do they get triggered into the East Main requirements if they expand as it stands now?
Yes. So if the non-conforming provisions would apply, we have some recommendations on how to respond to that request.
So that's a good answer for why we're doing this now. So
Okay.
Bellevue Club 6, that's already kind of taken care of, as I understand. So we don't really need to discuss that one any further, right, Mike? I mean, you can bring it back. And
Yes, that one is, I believe, is resolved.
okay. Bellevue Club 1, any comments or questions? Want to bring that back? Councilmember Robertson.
Thanks. I have an overarching comment about Bellevue Club, which touches on several of these. So staff has recommended that there be a 20% threshold for redevelopment before some of the requirements. And that was based on the Bellred plan. And the difference between this plan and the Bellred plan is when the Planning Commission and Council were doing Bellred, the goal of the non-conforming use rules was to allow the businesses that were there to stay. But the other goal was to eventually see a redevelopment and have those light industrial uses go away and have the mixed use with the residential businesses and stuff. I don't feel that way about the Bellevue Club. The Bellevue Club is, I mean, I'm not a member, but the Bellevue Club is an amenity. As the downtown densifies and the whole city grows, it's going to only have more importance and be more relevant. So I would personally like to see it so that if the athletic facilities, you know, with the meeting spaces and stuff that are part of that, and the hotel uses of the Bellevue Club, if they want to grow those, if they want to double the size, go for it. Invest in it, make it better. Just meet the requirements for the performance standards and the designs, like the setbacks and the heights and the FAR. I don't think we should start requiring them to change their use because they want to expand their use. It's not a use I want to see go away. So that's woven into a lot of these, but I'd like to see the code, at least have us discuss changing the code so that that use can stay, because I'd like it to stay forever. It's going to be needed.
I really agree with you. I think you said it very well. And I think I'd like staff to bring back something that it gets triggered if there's a change in the purpose of use. So, you know, if they decide to mow down the Bellevue Club as an athletic facility and turn it into a, you know, office tower or whatever, all of a sudden that triggers everything. But as long as it continues in the use that it's designed to be, it's a business. You know, it's like a childcare business. And if they were to expand, all of a sudden that would trigger all these things. And I don't want to see that happen either. We can never create a Bellevue Club again in Bellevue because of the property prices here. And I just don't want to confine them so much that it doesn't make sense for them to continue that business. And they can't ever expand it without triggering something. So that's my opinion. So Councilmember Zahn and then Councilmember Lee.
So I agree with the discussion about the Bellevue Club and the function it serves for our community. My question is more around consistency of non-conforming use. I remember, what was it, a couple of years ago, we were talking about the nursery. It was a non-conforming use. So if we start to look at this differently, does that mean that we are looking at other non-conforming uses in the same way? I'm just trying to understand what kind of precedents this might set and being really clear about what that might be. I'm not making any judgments. I'm just asking the question from the standpoint of understanding.
I think that actually it's consistent because we were maintaining the business of the nursery at the same time without, but anyway, that's a good question. I have that written down. Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree with Councilmember Robertson and the mayor. It's been around for 40 years, and you know, surprisingly, I'm not a member either, but they still have the original founding members. 300 of them or more still remain, and it provides a purpose, very specific purpose, like you talked about. So I believe that you know, there's no reason to change it, and so it has the, you know, it serves the community specifically. Thank you.
So Councilmember Robertson kind of did an overarching thing that covers all the Bellevue Club recommendations here. So is that and does anybody not agree with looking at it that way? Go ahead, Councilmember Stokes.
I'm not answering that. The answer to your question is not the same one I want to address.
Okay.
I do think bifurcating this will be more effective and efficient, and we can keep focused on what we're doing. I agree with what has been said.
Okay, thank you. All right, so any more comments or questions? Deputy Mayor.
And just rereading this, Mayor, I'd like to request that staff also bring back WIG number 6, the DA for the catalyst or special amenity.
Okay.
I see some discrepancies there. I think it'd be worthwhile having a conversation on. Thank you.
Okay. All right. I think we've hit all the WIG ones.
Mayor?
Yes.
Mayor,
Councilmember
on the Bellevue Club, I just want to be clear. So we talked about as long as they continue to be there as a business and if they expand and stay within that particular business. But since this is a land use code for the East Main area, if sometime in the future that property is sold for other uses, then the underlying code would still apply. So I just want to make sure that we are accounting for that in our underlying code, so that just like one of you commented about the other property, that if it was ever sold, we want to make sure that the underlying code reflects the guiding principles and the vision that we have. So I'm asking the question about whether we still need to account for some of these comments, because if the use was ever to change, then it would revert back to the underlying code. So
that's a good point.
Mike or Brad.
Mr. Miyake.
Yeah, hey, thank you, Mayor. I was wondering, Mike, can you actually articulate what you believe we're being directed to bring back on the Bellevue Club?
So the sentiment that I'm reading from this conversation is an interest in the code allowing for the Bellevue Club to continue in its current use and allow for expansion of that particular use, and not be subject to the provisions of the code that would trigger housing requirements or other amenities. This is, we would need to explore the different options to try to reach that interest. As far as how we structure the code, responding to Councilmember Zahn's comments, it is achievable, but there are probably a couple of paths that we would have to explore to get you there.
And I'm assuming the rest of the council is good with that. I'm just trying to understand. I just want to make sure we're clear, Mike, in terms of what we're bringing back.
Yeah, I think what we need to bring back is some information to help the council understand the different options and the consequence of the options.
Right.
So there's a broad vision that's been established for the East Main area. This would be something that preserves an existing use that's not entirely aligned with that as in an expanded form. But that being said, the council can certainly provide us alternate direction here, and we will do what we can to get you where you're trying to go.
So I think you're hearing alternate direction, and I think it'd be great to see what kind of path you would recommend, but we want to hear the pros and cons of everything.
Thank you, Mayor.
So any more comments or questions? Do you have a, Deputy Mayor, did you want to say something? Okay.
I'm good, thank you.
Staff, do you feel like you have solid direction for what to bring back and provide us with the information that we need to have a conversation, and that we could do, there's a broad support for initiating the public hearing so we can get community input as well?
Yes, a quick response to your question. I did hear support for the public hearing, so we'll work to schedule that at the earliest date that we can make that work. And then as far as the direction, we are clearly going to be bringing back information on the requested amendments. We got some feedback tonight that will help us try to frame those when we're bringing them back. So I do appreciate that. So we'll, I think from our combination of notes, we can organize this in a way that makes logical sense in setting up those future study sessions, as well as taking into consideration any information the council wants to interject following the public hearing.
Yeah, that will be helpful to hear from the public as well. Okay, that's good. Thank you, everybody. Oh, Councilmember Robertson and Deputy Mayor.
Sorry, Mayor, I was just saying if we needed a motion for this or not, for the to direct
Yeah,
staff.
we do.
Okay.
We do need a direction here. So would you like to make a motion?
Certainly. I move to direct staff to schedule a public hearing on the land use code amendment.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
Mayor, can I ask my follow-up question?
Yes.
Okay, so I just wanted, before we close the topic, I wanted to check whether staff will be taking whatever actions with regard to SEPA or whatever to allow us to talk about these issues. And if we want to, as a body, make those changes to make them without a delay. So that was my question.
So we certainly will, whatever the council decisions are, we will find the procedural path that gets us to the end as quickly as we can. But without having the information on that direction, it's hard for us to do that analysis. But we will, do that as quickly as we can once we get that direction on the amendments to the code.
Okay, so can I ask that we bring back any that would require additional SEPA review first from a timing perspective? Because if we're not going to kick that off until you get direction from council, I think we should take those up as the first study session items so that if we need to do the SEPA review, it can start before we take the ones that wouldn't need that parallel work.
Yeah, we'll look at how we organize this with that in mind. It can be a collection of changes that can cause that. So we'll try to, I understand the goal. Let's get this to the finish line as quickly as we can, and let's deal with the procedural process side of this as quickly as we can along that path. So let us think about how we organize this when we bring that back with that interest in mind.
Thank you, Mike.
Mr. Miyake, did you want to say something?
No, Mayor.
Okay.
I'm just contemplating how we're going to bring it back.
Okay, good. So we have one more thing. We have regional issues, and I'm just going to say we can ask questions tonight, no problem, but you're also going to have a whole week to think about this and submit any questions by email to staff because this will come back to us. So go ahead, Mr. Miyake.
I'm going to actually turn this over on the regional issues to Lacey Jane, our person that's leading our intergovernmental effort. Lacey Jane.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of council. Tonight, we're joined by a very special guest, Brianna Murray, Vice President at Gordon Thomas Honeywell Governmental Relations. And as you know, Brianna has been a great advocate for Bellevue's priorities in our state legislative efforts for many years. And she is going to give us an overview of the state legislative session and how Bellevue's priorities fared during that process. And then Assistant City Attorney Matt McFarland will give us a heads up about some implementation efforts that will be coming up shortly, as Mayor referred to. So I'd love to turn things over to Brianna and welcome her tonight.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lacey Jane, and good evening, Mayor and council members. I am your state lobbyist and appreciate having the opportunity to give you a briefing on the recent legislative session that concluded on April 25th. You all received a comprehensive written report from me that goes into much greater detail than we'll be able to cover this evening. I encourage you to refer to that report for detailed information. Tonight, I'm going to provide just a brief overview. The 2021 legislative session was a 105-day session, a traditional long legislative session, and it was conducted almost entirely virtually. In many ways, this was a historic legislative session, and one of those reasons is that it was almost entirely virtual. There was a lot of activity that occurred over that 105 days. Most significantly, though, 334 bills passed into law. This is close to what we would see in an average year. It's just about 30 bills shy of what we see in an average year. So despite the virtual format, the legislature took a lot of action. Some of the large highlights are that they enacted a low carbon fuel standard, a cap and trade proposal, capital gains tax, and much more, which I'll go into more detail on. In addition to passing 334 bills, the legislature also developed its state budgets. Heading into the legislative session, there were a lot of concerns that the state was going to be facing pandemic-related revenue shortfalls and would need to make significant budget cuts. But over the course of the legislative session, not only did the economy rebound to pre-pandemic levels, but the federal government approved the American Rescue Plan Act, which infused $4.25 billion in federal funds into the state's budgets. That resulted in the legislature passing the largest operating and capital budgets that it has in recent history. So very significant investments. The exception to this is the transportation budget, which is an area that we spend a lot of time advocating on behalf of the city. Transportation-related revenues continued to stay at an all-time low throughout the entire legislative session, and there's still no predictable return in sight as far as returning to pre-pandemic levels. Our advocacy in the transportation arena focused in two different areas. The first area is continuing to deliver projects along the 405 corridor, specifically the North End improvements that were already committed to be funded with bonded toll revenues. Throughout the pandemic, when toll revenues declined, it created a delay in when bonding against those toll revenues could occur and resulted in a delay to the project. Our ask of the legislature was to take any action possible in order to deliver the project on time, which would be close to 2024 or 2025 at the latest, and that this would occur, the project would be completed prior to bus rapid transit being deployed on the corridor. Representative Wanda Slatter and Representative Davina Dorr joined us in some extremely strong advocacy so that federal funding was allocated to backfill a portion of the lost toll revenues. And there were several budget provisos that were included directing WashDOT to explore different solutions for the 2022 legislature to consider. So good progress on that issue, but certainly more work to be done. The second area we focused on in transportation was advocating for additional projects to receive funding. We partnered with the Bellevue Chamber to prioritize 6 key projects that are key to the economic growth of the city and key to the city accommodating the significant amount of growth you all are anticipating in the next few years. In order to fund new projects, the legislature does need to adopt an additive transportation revenue package. While they spent many hours, many meetings, many public hearings on the discussion of a transportation revenue package, they ultimately failed to pass one this session. In the package proposals that were released, 3 of our requested projects were allocated funding in both the House and the Senate. So $175 million was included for the 521 24th Avenue project, $18 million was included for the Bellevue segment of East Trail, and $6.9 million was included for the Mountains to Sound Greenway Trail. If the legislature is able to reach an agreement on a transportation revenue package, we are well positioned to receive funding for those projects. And we will continue advocating that they also allocate funding for the remainder of our requested projects. While they didn't reach an agreement on a transportation package this session, discussions are ongoing. Optimistically, they could come back as early as this fall in September, October, November, and adopt a transportation revenue package. And most pessimistically, they could wait until 2023 to adopt a transportation package. And we're actively following those conversations. In addition to transportation, the legislature tackled affordable housing and homelessness with strong zealousness, and they made historic investments in rental assistance, the Housing Trust Fund, rapid housing acquisition, and more. Most notably in this arena, at the city's request, the legislature appropriated $2 million to the Eastgate shelter. And I would just note that that's a significant investment, more than most other communities throughout the state received in the capital budget, and is a reflection of the hard work of our 41st district legislators. In addition to significant funding investments, the legislature made a lot of policy changes. I want to highlight 4 in particular. The first is that they approved House Bill 1070, which authorizes the city to use 1590 sales tax funds for acquisition rather than just construction of affordable housing. Second is Senate Bill 5160. This bill puts forward a process that will occur once the eviction moratoria ends. I think you all may have seen in recent news that the governor extended the eviction moratoria until September 30th. After September 30th, the provisions of this bill will kick in and outline exactly how mediation and repayment plans will work. And finally, the legislature approved 2 different bills in the name of improving planning for affordable housing that do include preemption of local control. And that is House Bill 1220 and Senate Bill 5235. I believe that once I'm done presenting, we're going to go into those 2 bills in a bit more detail. I'll just note that the city will be required to adopt code changes as a result of these bills passing. And I would note that without our strong advocacy, the code changes that you would be having to make would be far more significant than what you're going to need to make under the final versions of the bill. So I know we never like it when we get preempted by the state, but we did mitigate the amount of preemption that was included in these 2 bills. Finally, I want to hit on criminal justice reform because it was such a strong theme of this legislative session. A package of over 12 different police reform bills passed into law and included several changes that will change how policing looks in Washington state. Some of the highlights include establishing for a duty for an officer to intervene if another officer is engaging in excessive force, banning of neck restraints, chokeholds, and no-knock warrants, and strong restrictions on the use of tear gas and vehicular pursuits. Again, those are just some highlights and much more change to occur there. The legislature did allocate $20 million of one-time funding statewide with an allocation to cities of $4 per capita in order to implement the changes in the police reform bills. That funding is not likely to be adequate, but it is nice that any funding was allocated to the local level for implementation. In addition to the package of police reform bills, the legislature also responded to the Supreme Court decision referred to as the Blake decision that was issued in the middle of session that stated that the statute making the possession of controlled substances illegal is unconstitutional. The legislature responded by recriminalizing the possession of controlled substances, but they made it a misdemeanor rather than a felony. And did so temporarily. So that statute is going to expire on July 1 of 2023. And in the intermediary time, a robust work group is going to be making recommendations to the legislature on how to proceed moving forward. In addition to making it a misdemeanor, an individual is required to be offered diversion to treatment twice before they can be arrested or issued a citation for the misdemeanor. So strong emphasis on diversion to treatment rather than arrest or prosecution. So overall, I would say the 2021 legislative session was successful for advancing the City of Bellevue priorities. In particular, we made great progress in securing capital funding for affordable housing and made significant progress on transportation. I would note that we work as a team. I rely a lot on the expertise of city staff as they review bills, but also rely so heavily on our partnership with our state legislators in the 41st and 48th. Senator Wellman, Senator Cooter, Representative Tai, Representative Sen, Representative Slatter, and Representative Wallen are such strong partners to us. And given how important Bellevue is to the region and to the state, there are many other regional legislators that have also been very helpful to us. But I just want to give special shout out to our 41st and 48th district legislators. I will conclude there, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have or allow Matt to carry on the presentation.
Matt, if you wouldn't mind speaking to the two land use bills that Brianna mentioned, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Certainly. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members. So I am here to talk about two specific bills that will affect the city's land use code. The first bill is Senate Bill 5235, and Senate Bill 5235 addresses local authority to regulate the number of unrelated persons living in a dwelling unit or home. And under this bill, cities may only limit the number of unrelated persons living in a home based on occupant load per square foot and or health and safety provisions established by the building code or city ordinances. So the way to think about this is that Senate Bill 5235, which again addresses local authority to regulate the number of unrelated persons living in a dwelling unit or home, will require the city to update the land use code in order to respond to this new state law. The bad news is this state law goes into effect on July 25th. So we are anticipating that we will bring back interim official controls relatively quickly next month in order to address the changes that we'll need to make to the land use code with respect to this Senate bill. And I do want to point out, just with this brief introduction that I'm giving tonight, I do want to point out that this bill accepted short-term rentals and transient lodging, and the city may still regulate those separately. So what this bill really goes to is city regulation of the number of unrelated people living together. The other bill that passed that's going to require quick action by the city before the effective date is House Bill 1220. And House Bill 1220 addresses municipal regulation of supportive housing, transitional housing, emergency housing, and indoor emergency shelters. So this bill states that cities must allow transitional housing and permanent supportive housing in zones where the city allows residential units or hotels. The bill also contains additional language stating that the cities must allow indoor emergency shelter and emergency housing in land use districts or zones where hotels are allowed. The city still retains the authority to require reasonable occupancy, spacing, and intensity of use requirements to protect public health and safety. But once again, the state is mandating that the cities allow transitional housing and permanent supportive housing where the city allows residential units or hotels, and indoor emergency shelter and emergency housing in zones where hotels are allowed. So development services will bring back an interim official control to amend the land use code to address this state mandated provision in House Bill 1220 as well. We do think we can address both of these requirements, both the transitional and supportive housing requirements, and also the emergency housing and the indoor emergency shelter requirements in one interim official control. But the main reason that we're introducing these separately is because of the effective dates at the end of July. And we wanted to let council know with respect to these specific land use bills that we will be bringing back 2 interim official controls next month. One to address city regulation of unoccupied persons living together in a dwelling unit or house, and then one to address city regulation of transitional housing, supportive housing, emergency housing, and indoor emergency shelter.
Is that also the date of July 25th?
It's actually broken up with respect to those. The transitional housing and the supportive housing regulations are July 25th. The emergency housing and the indoor emergency shelter are in September. That's when those become effective. But we do intend to address all of these with one interim official control and try to meet the July date for all of them. We're gonna have 2 separate interim official controls, one for 5235, one for 1220, but we're gonna take all 4 of those 1220 mandates and put them into one interim official control. At least that's our plan, obviously pending council direction when we bring them forward. And I am here also to answer any preliminary questions that council may have about these 2 bills.
Are there any comments or questions from the council tonight on this? Councilmember Robertson.
Thank you. When will you be briefing EBCC?
That's a good question. I don't think we've talked about that quite yet, but since we are going to bring these back, and that's a good point also because these are citywide mandates. So when we bring these back to council with the proposed interim official controls, I can certainly give an update on the EBCC briefing as well. And I can also reach out to you, Councilmember Robertson, as the EBCC liaison as we talk about that internally as well.
Not me anymore. It's Deputy Mayor, but no,
yes, that's true.
I always want to we want to make sure that if we're passing something that state law requires, that EBCC is up to date so they can approve it as well. So
that's a very good point. And I think I apologize, but I think we're aware of that step, but we didn't think about the dates for that step yet.
Yeah, with August break, it gets a little tricky. So thanks.
Any other comments or questions on this? So tell me your timeline. So you're going to come back on the 12th, is that right? July 12th?
I'm going to defer to the clerk's office here because they know your schedule better than I do. But I think the anticipated schedule is to bring back the interim official controls and to try to bring the city into compliance as soon as possible, and then to hold the public hearing that's required within 60 days before the council recess in August. And I do want to point out that one thing council has been very successful at doing, at least while I've been working with the city, is being very nimble with these interim official controls and then being very mindful of the public comment and also the larger policy discussions with the permanent regulations. And I've seen council a number of times bring the city into compliance immediately with an interim official control and then have the deeper discussion and the public comment through that public hearing process that occurs. And that's what Development Services and the City Attorney's Office is anticipating, is that the interim official controls are interim, and that we would use that process to facilitate the larger discussion on all of these items. But because of the July 25th date, if the city clerk could give exact dates, I do know we're treating that as our deadline here.
Yeah, the interim, thank you, Matt. The interim official controls are both scheduled to come before the council on July 12th. And then the public hearing on both of those IOCs is scheduled currently for August 2nd.
Oh, okay, which is our last meeting before break.
Yes.
Do we have any quasi-judicial restrictions with this?
No, these are legislative items. And so these will be processed just through land use code process for very truncated emergency version of, certainly not as long as the East Main Luca has taken, but it's a legislative process, a city council legislative process.
Okay. All right. Any comments or questions? Yes, Councilmember Zahn.
My comment wasn't related to these two bills and the interim control, more of Brianna's comments, because we did hear that on the eviction moratorium that perhaps the more narrow version that's passed by the governor may not quite bridge the gap. So to get to the 5160 tenant protection and landlord assistance money. So if there is more information on that, I think it would be helpful to hear that information, because certainly we don't want to have an eviction crisis in our community where as we're trying to address homelessness, that we have even more people getting evicted. So that's one of my comments. And then the other one, and you didn't comment on it, but I noticed in the packet 5287, which is the MFTE extension for an additional 12 years. And I just wondered if, since we are modifying our MFTE, is that additional 12 years something we can do later on, or because it looks like now it's allowed beyond the first 12 years.
Great questions, council members on. So on the first one regarding the eviction moratoria, last that I heard, we're waiting for details on the specifics in the governor's proclamation. I'll be honest, I am technically on vacation today, so we could have received more details today and I missed them, but I'll ask my staff to double check and follow up with city staff. On the second bill, the MFTE bill, if the city authorizes a 12-year MFTE post the effective date of the bill, which is July 25th, then you will have the option at the end of that 12 years to extend it an additional 12 years. It is not an upfront 24-year exemption. I hope that clarifies and answers your question. And I would defer to your city staff and legal team to interpret the details of that. And they probably don't have that handy tonight, but that was certainly the legislative intent behind the bill.
Okay, great. Well, it's good to know that that's now allowed in there. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, well, it's a great meeting. We got a lot done tonight. I really appreciate everybody's engagement, and thanks to the staff for all the good work you've done. I think we are done here, so meeting is adjourned. I'll see you next week. Thank you.